The fair-haired guy leans in and swears this time he's finally going to live his life for real. A bald man gapes in shock at a boy, because the kid is already imagining how to leave his mark on this world. Rain hammers the streets when a girl yells for an ambulance, saying there's a man trapped in the car and his badge is sprawled on the ground. The man sprawls there, totally spent, gulping air like it might be his last, staring into the question, is this really how he's about to die? He's got nobody, no family, no friends, not even a shred of meaning. He never cared about a thing, and when he's gone, he leaves nothing behind, because honestly, he isn't special and nobody remembers him for anything at all. This guy finally realizes he's been alone his whole life, and if he's lucky, he'll get another shot at life after this one. The boy rushes up to his father and blurts that Reese is planning to sneak into the nearby forest alone to grab kuko nuts, and that forest is packed with dangers. So with Reese only 10 years old, it's clearly too risky, meaning they should wait until he's at least 13. The boy glares at his parents with raw resentment, then quickly tells them not to worry. No musk wolves roam the forest this time of year, but even so, his mother can't stop worrying. The boy snaps that all he's doing out here eating and sleeping in this forest is pure boredom, and the father fires back that Reem is nothing like the other kids he's growing by leaps and bounds. His mother snaps that she's terrified. What he's chasing is way too dangerous, but it doesn't matter, because Elvin lives 1,000 years, and Minoru Kito, he still dies in a car accident at 30. Then he got reborn as an elf, living a whole 1,000 years, so now he's living as Reese, remembering the moment his mother cradled him as a newborn in her arms. He has no clue what fate is cooking up for him, but God handed him this shot and this life. He's going all in to live with zero regrets. He swore he'd take every day seriously, and at just 9 years old, he already laid the groundwork. Even his parents were stunned by how soon he managed to stand on his own. Because elves live for ages, time feels blurry to them, and their whole settlement spread out around the ancient tree. Yggdrasil is wrapped in a massive invisible shield from the outside, with no disasters and no deadly magical beasts, leaving nuts as basically their only real meal. That's exactly the kind of safe, glowing world where the elves were born and raised. Most of them lived to old age without ever stepping outside, and for them, that was simply the way things always were. The protagonist erupts in a heated argument with his parents, and then an old man with a cane steps in, declaring that Kleinhoff is still just as active as ever. He says that by age 5, the boy's already talking like he's been here forever, and by 10, he's ready to slip out into the world on his own. Then his parents get hit with the shock of their lives when the elders show up at their door. Long ago, there were elves who couldn't stop staring at the outside world, but every step down that road was brutal, unforgiving, and nearly impossible. 600 years since he'd taken the title of elder, and the news still haunted him. Most elves who stepped into the outside world never came back, especially the ones who tried dealing with people, and that's when he turned to Reese. The elder leans in and asks Reese if he's still ready to step out into the outside world, and Reese realizes he's still sharper than most kids. Then his mind snaps to his mom and dad, grateful to every soul in this forest that kept lifting him up. But he doesn't want to cling to this world, he wants to slip out of it with a trace. Because after 1,000 years, the last thing he'd do is waste more time in this tiny place he's craving everything beyond these walls, meeting new people, and finally getting to know the outside world. With a rock-solid stare and a calm voice, the protagonist says he'll live with zero regrets, and the father shoots back, "If you're that determined, then we're not stopping you." The elder leans in and tells him, "Step outside and you'll be the first soul to do it in 100 years since Rahab Lurie." Then gently strokes the boy's head and adds, "If you truly want to go into the outside world, I'll lay out every detail for you. But first, he's got one plan, make him take the test he's about to hand down," and Reese Klein nods with a grin. Then the elder leans in and tells the boy to keep grinding every healing spell, because that's the elf's true essence, right up until he turns 100. The elder tells the boy, "Only your magic can shield you from what's waiting out there, so by the time you hit 100, you'd better pass the test I've laid out for you, and then I'll finally let you step into the outside world." The boy knows 100 years sounds brutal, but for an elf, it's just 1/10 of a lifetime. So when the elder lays out the rules for stepping into the outside world, he doesn't argue, he agrees to the test. This is the kind of test a guy with half-hearted grit can't beat, and if he ever forgets it, he's done. 10 years have already crushed by, and now the main character is about to unleash the healing magic, the breath of the goddess. He stands tall with total confidence, and then energy flares up in front of him. This is the spell. The old one stared at him, stunned by how far he'd pushed things, then blurted out, "So you had just brought back a giant tree from the last generations. It's been standing for over 1,000 years. And this magic was the absolute crown of elven sorcery. His restoration magic was the highest of the highest. I mean, only 10 years had passed since that deal, and yet the power he could unleash was straight up enormous. He leans in and asks Reese how he ever mastered power on that level, and Reese admits he's been honing his magical gifts since he was just a kid. The elder leans in and asks how old he is, 20 this year, so he's been studying on his own since he was 5, or at least close to that. And long before the elder even gave him the permission to step outside condition, he was already gearing up for this moment. First, he cranked up his magical power, then flipped through the magical books at the forest library. A giant archive on the edge of the ancient tree, where one book claimed that before you hit 20, your total strength is locked in by 3 things: your environment, your natural potential, and how hard you push. He kept repeating the training, pushing his magic to the edge, draining it to the very limit, wiping the recovery off his face, and then forcing it back to maximum again. Then it hit him here. A human only lives about 60 years. If magic in a person's body keeps swelling up until they turn 20, what in the world happens to the elves? There's even a real shot he could keep stacking his total magic power until he hits 300 years old, and the elder never saw it coming, because restoration magic shouldn't have been this easy to master with his exam still 80 years away. Even so, with enough training and practice, someone from another race could still learn other attribute magic at least a little. But in the forest library, all he found were books on restoration, and that left him staring at the ceiling like, so where are the other attribute magic books hiding? The elder insists there's a way, but does he really want to test it with his own hands? Because the guy fires back that he's dying to try everything he can before the exam comes in. 80 years? Turns out, there aren't any demon tribes left, and even among the elves, magic-obsessed scholars are basically extinct. No one can change that. Because the elders pass it down like a family curse, and the key to the forbidden wing of the forest library is in his hands. To read magic books, someone who can't write them will need a whole 100 years, and that's why the main character bows his thanks, grabs the key, and promises he'll master the other kinds of magic, just not so much that he burns himself out. And just like that, decades slam by in the blink of an eye. People are already saying, wow, it's amazing. Reese cuts straight to the chase. We need to meet right now. And at 30, he swears he already mastered every attribute of magic. The elder even handed him the keys to the library, and now he can't stop wondering what kind of magic will come next. And today's the big day. New books are finally supposed to arrive from the outside world. The elves can only trade news with it through their dealings with the de Garland family, the ones running everything around them long ago. The elder and the head of the Galaran family struck a deal. And ever since then, they've kept that information exchange going, non-stop. They trade precious ancient wood from their forest and almost impossible to find treasure from magical books, and then hand those books straight over to the Garland family. He told everyone that begging elves to teach him magic is the bare minimum of what he's willing to do. Because in all of mankind's long history, he claims there's nobody like him, then he admits his real dream, becoming a husband and finally proposing to his childhood friend. And I can't wait to introduce him to my sweet childhood friend. The man just laughs. After their last meeting, the protagonist finally clicks on what he said, and now he's stuck wondering if Grill's view of him has shifted since then. The main character greets him like no time has passed, tells him they haven't seen each other in forever, and then blurts, "So what kind of magic books did you bring me this time?" The bespectacled guy suddenly freezes in terror, realizing elves are real and that his father was right all along. The boy drops into a deep bow and tells Reese, "We've never met," then introduces himself as Garius Garland, the rightful, legitimate son of Grillet Garland. Ever since he was a kid, his father Grill spun him stories, but the last time they saw each other, it was only a few days ago. He was supposed to send his father in his place, but old age crippled his legs, so he had to step up. Then he rushes in an apology, and his father fires back, asking when he'd seen him last. About 2 years before his dad and mom even tied the knot so roughly, 22 years ago, the protagonist suddenly realizes he's been an elf for that long, and somehow he's completely forgotten it. Whoa! The human world is shifting fast, and in total shock, Garius grabs the guy and demands, "So you'll really leave this forest in 7 years?" If he counted right, that means the guy's already 93. If he can break out of this forest, he wants to head straight to their house, so can he tell Grilly he'll come? And for now, he just needs to stay healthy. He agrees, and that's exactly what his father wanted to hear. The protagonist watched the carriage disappear, then his mind raced. If he can clear the elder's test, he'll finally get to see Grilla again. The protagonist stacks a handful of books in his home and declares they'll chase his boredom away for the next few years. Right after that, the story of the hero and the useless mage roared to life, how they crushed the Demon King until the elder finally declared, "The demon race is gone from this world." And even the existence of elves left humans whispering, "Are they real?" He clutches a single book in his hands, staring at how ancient it looks, like it's one breath away from falling apart. Sure, it screams magic, but teleportation too. A magic recommendation, he can't help thinking it might actually let him pull something incredible out of it. Once he cracked the magic of every attribute, he finally threw himself into ancient magic too, because magic comes in tons of flavors, from the spells of the long-gone subhuman race in prehistoric days to the techniques his own tribe still uses. Ancient magic isn't like normal 4-element spells. It demands a whole pile of special conditions to trigger it, and with so many rules to crack, you'd need years just to research them all. The more he read, the more his curiosity burned, and soon he made up his mind to try what he'd just learned. He decides to teleport right near the house, and the main character fires up his teleportation magic to make it happen. He gets hit with this rush of confidence and swears he nailed the spell on the very first try right, as he vanishes and drops from the book in a single wild moment. The protagonist jolts his eyes open and the air reeks of blood right in front of him. An evil creature snarls and growls like it's about to strike. People nearby swarmed him with questions, demanding to know where he came from. Were they chasing him from the guild's persecution squad? It looks like the teleport worked, but did he really slip out of the barrier? Then he spots a human child. The protagonist had only spammed that one teleport spell, thinking he'd landed close to home, but instead, he popped into a totally unfamiliar spot outside the barrier that keeps Yggdrasil hidden. Hot on his heels, people he never even run into start snapping at him, demanding to know where he's from. Are you one of those mercenary guild guys? Right in front of him, a pack of magical beasts blocks the way, then he spots kids behind them, getting attacked by werewolves. One of the kids jerks his eye open, and the main character just freezes because somehow this kid is still alive. The bald guy mutters, full of disgust, that they're not just animals anymore now. Even the gilded people are hunting them. And the worst part is, there's nothing to offer. No bribe, no goods at all. So the main character's left hearing the worst news imaginable. One of the wolves suddenly lets out a deep warning growl, and everyone snaps to attention. Then one person blurts that they should bolt and sneak up into the sky before the monsters close in, so they sprint off and leave the main character alone, staring down the wolves. The wolf shot off without warning and barreled straight for the protagonist, but he snapped into action, threw up tempering magic, and cast a spell instantly. His fist turns rock hard, and the protagonist fires off a werewolf-powered punch, smacking one of the wolves straight in front of him. The protagonist blurts out that this is body-enhancing magic, something werewolves supposedly used, and he doesn't even stop to worry that it demands muscles. Then the guy steps forward and calls the next wolf, already snapping into a fighting stance. One guy blurts to the boss that he's got freaky ears and elf or not. He won't say so, the boss's jaw drops, and he demands what legendary creature is lurking here, since the rumors claim elves only carry the magic of restoration, the very power the guy just used to take down the wolves. Then the main character snaps his focus to the kids, and his heart drops when he realizes that one little girl is barely breathing. He tells you everything's fine, since she's still alive, you'll find a cure, and she'll be better before long. He thrusts both hands out in front, hurls a killer mix of supreme fire and restoration magic, then follows it up with a full-on healing burst. All three freeze in disbelief as something bursts into flames, only to realize the fire isn't spreading at all. It's getting sucked straight into their body. The girl snaps her eyes open and stares at the man in front of her in pure shock, because he healed a wound that even the strongest potion couldn't fix right on the spot. He spots a collar around the girl's neck, and the guy blurts that it's a sealing spell locked tight, so she can't speak at all. He realized what was going on fast, so he told her everything was fine, then warned her not to move, because the moment anyone but the owner tries to take it, the magical item for theft explodes. First, the protagonist breaks the spell, and at the exact same moment, destructive magic crashes through, in a flood so powerful, it crushes the seal's own magic. He yanks the Demon King's thread and then tosses that collar aside right before it can blow up. Then the collar detonates in mid-air, and the main character grins as he tells the girl she's crushing it. Every man in the room reels this dude just tore apart the magic of the seal by force. One of them blurts, "Wait, are you really an elf?" And the main character snaps back, "Yeah, and now you're all stuck with what's left." The man insists they were guarding the kids, but fate just dropped them straight into a pack of werewolves. At first they tried to save them. Yet the wolves had already torn everyone up, and if he hadn't stepped in, they'd all be food by now. She turns to him and thanks him. So he asked the main character if they wanted to save them, then told him to go ahead and rip those ropes loose. He figures they've already clocked he's an elf, so when the men stare in shock, he smirks and explains, "Elves hear like nothing else. I caught every word you were saying. And yeah, those ears aren't sharp just for looks." Now he's about to fire off 3 questions. Who are you? Who's hunting you? And why are you after us? Then it hits hard. They decided to snatch small kids and haul them straight through a deadly forest. If they give him a short answer, he might even save their lives. Once they say they understand, they promise they'll answer. First off, they're nothing but hired traders. Some parents are so broke they sell their own kids, and then the guild turns on them, persecuting them hard after they get tricked. Then, right when they were handing over the goods, mercenaries came roaring in, and they barely slipped away. taking this route because it was their only shot at getting out alive. He gets it no matter what world he's in, people never change that much, so you better not get too close, and that's exactly what the elder warned him. Those creatures are vicious, sharp, and still full of fear, don't you ever forget that. The man says they've already answered, so tell him to take this off their backs. The boy replies that the elder ordered him to stay away from people. So he wipes the whole meeting from their minds. Then the man erupts in rage, and the main character counters with memory control magic that turns it into full-on memory loss. All three look totally lost, and the main character tells them to just stay like this for a little while. The girl yanks the guy by his clothes and blurts that he saved her, calling him an elven man. And the guy snaps back that he's the son of the Kleins. He tells her his name is Reese, and she's just lucky she got her voice back safe and sound. Then he drops his head, apologizes for failing to save the other kids, and when you see that cross carved into his chest, he admits he read it's the mark of a servant. The girl breaks down in tears and tells him, "If you were stronger, everything would be okay. I can shield you, but I can't do a thing against this." His magic was terrifyingly powerful, so now she's begging him to bring her along, because she wants power like his too. She catches herself speaking in a shaky voice, but behind that fragile act asking how to get stronger, there's steel-hard determination, and even after being warned not to pick fights, he refuses to walk away since he stepped in. He'll see it through and take responsibility for getting her back. Then, out of nowhere, the main character snaps back to reality. He's not human anymore, and he blurts to the girl that he can't. 90 years ago, I got reborn as an elf, and time still drags on the same, only now it's pulling me farther from what I used to be, and I'll never let this little man ride along with me into the future. And before he can even step into the outside world, 7 more years have to crawl by, just 7 years for him, nothing more, no waiting beyond that. But for her, it'll drag out into 7 brutal years, yet he can't wipe out that determination, he'll burn it deep into her soul. Someone yells, "They're here, no traitor is getting out." And he snaps that he'll hand it over to the guild that's been chasing those bastards for 7 years, right from today. If this girl's grit stays this strong, then fate will make them cross paths again sooner than you think. Then people whispered about it, an anonymous girl, shrouded in mystery, suddenly crashed into the battles, and by some mistake, he ended up learning the truth about her energy-driven corner move. In just 100 years, Reese would have been an elf since his rebirth, and the elder rushed out an apology he'd missed calling him, because every generation had its share of troublemakers. Then he offered Reese to lock in his studies until he hit 100. Yet even with that, the elder didn't abandon his plan. Elves spend almost their whole lives tucked inside this village, guarded by the ancient tree Yggdrasil, so imagine one careless soul stepping outside. It's like dropping a mouse straight onto a battlefield and watching everything explode. Totally. The main character finally rises, eyes sharp, and thinks, it's here at last, because for a whole 100 years, he's trained just to step into the outside world. At last, the elder finally lets it slip, his exam time has arrived, and it's go time. Even at 100 years old, after he's finished every last bit of training, he's still determined to push past the ancient tree forest. Then, with total confidence, he announces the terrifying truth. Someone's been watching them from right behind. Reese bursts to the elder, pointing at the baby everyone's calling super active, and demands to know who claimed it because he can't spot a soul, he can only hear a mysterious voice. The elder leans in and tells his voice straight up, this guy's just as mischievous as he is, and pure trouble is all he ever is. But he's so damn good that he earned the right to clear the exam in only 100 years, call it capable if you want, because after this, he'll learn the truth the hard way, from his own experience. The moment the owner of that voice steps out of nowhere, they appear right in front of the guy, clutching a staff, and they blurt out, "This is interesting, oh?" Then Reese's eyes go wide with shock. He's blown away by the speed. Turns out it's a girl. She whips off her robe, introduces herself as Rahavluli, and says she'll hit 600 years old soon, so he can call her whatever he wants. Then the girl slams her staff onto the ground, and when she drops her name, the protagonist is hit with pure shock. An elf suddenly drops into the place where people are sick, cures every illness on the spot, hands out precious fruits as payment, and then vanishes like it was never there. The girl blurts out, "Are you talking about me?" and admits, "Yeah, I really do love fruits." Then the guy grins and says his centuries-old magical books ones he brought in from the outside world are packed with her, painting her as an elf so perfect that people try to imitate her. And yeah, this pioneer's idea is simple. When he steps into the outside world, he expects a powerful elf in real life. She looks like a doll, and all he has to do is survive her attacks until her magic finally runs out. He's totally stunned by that, and the girl asks if he'll keep things simple, right? Of course he can, because he knows restoration magic. After 300 years of training, you better cut her some slack. He realizes that one pass on this exam will finally fling open the gates to the outside world, and with zero hesitation, he declares confident as ever that he's ready. Right after that, a horrifying crack splits the ground, and a boulder slams up underneath him. He barely yanks himself back with a desperate jump, stunned out of his mind. She didn't even cast a spell, so how did she unleash something this savage that fast? The girl flicks into earth magic, earth spear dash. Then he freezes when he realizes she's already planted magical roots, and just like that, she starts preparing on the spot. Right after that, an earthen spear whips in from the side, and the guy almost eats it. He barely dodges, glaring and shouting that it's totally unfair. The girl spits out that people are cruel, cunning, and vile, and he's convinced the power will come from the staff, only to realize magic is already cooking in other places he has no idea about, and that's exactly how they pull it off. She stares us down and tells it straight out there in the real world. Just being able isn't enough to stay alive. She tells Rios, if you want to step into the outside world, you better master this lesson, no excuses. The girl snaps her head up in shock because the guy's doing the same earth magic, and he's slamming an earthen wall right in front of himself. Reese grins and tells the girl this paired magic is tied to her earth spear, and she just goes, you're interesting, because she figured an elf like you can only use restoration magic. He's basically human to the core because his past life was one, and now, boom, he fires up wind magic. He rockets upward like a raging whirlwind, and the girl's stunned. She thinks it's elite, high-class magic, then she grins and tries to knock him out of the sky. The girl launches a flurry of balls at him, and Rahab's magic isn't top tier in raw power, but she weaponizes it without ever casting a spell, shifting elements nonstop, and that makes her defense a nightmare. The guy can't pull off magic without words, not yet. Rahab flashes a smile and tells him she's fine. She won't back down for a second, so go ahead and keep dodging. He snaps back, and the shell detonates out in a burst. Then she demands to know why he's so desperate to see the outside world. He shoots back, so you want to talk about it now. The main character straight up admits that the elf lifespan is way too long for him, and that's probably exactly why. Rahav tells us that, for her, the elven settlement might just be the most peaceful place on earth. 100 years have roared past since he was born, and through every brutal hardship, he still kept grinding at magic because he wasn't done yet. Not until he carved his name into this world. In his past life, he couldn't care about a single thing. He never let anyone get close enough to be real. And when it all collapsed, regret was all he had left. So this time, the failure he lived through became the fuel. He wants nothing more than to make the world feel bigger, turn fun into a promise, and leave pieces of himself stuck deep in someone's heart. To make his wish come true, he has to step out into the real world, and the girl is completely stunned by it. Then the main character leans in and asks the girl, so why did you step out into the outside world? The girl cradled something round in her hands, and Reese leaned in, asking if it was a fruit. She blurted out that she just wanted to taste more delicious fruits. The moment the protagonist sees this, their jaw drops because the elf who can heal any disease demands priceless fruits as payment. She's been crazy about fruits forever, and here, they've got all those cocoa fruits, but once you've chewed the same stuff for 50 years, boredom hits like a wall. So she craved new flavors and begged to step out into the outside world. And the guy just asks, so that's all it is. The guy presses the girl, so that's the only reason you trained for 300 years. And she smirks, saying it's not finished yet. She found some way, and somehow those 300 years slipped by without her even noticing. Every elf has their own reasons, but after all these years, what she built wasn't for nothing, while all those brothers who never honed their gifts just gave up and left. She finally found safe passage and learned human tricks just in the last few centuries, so now she can roam the world and feast on all kinds of fruits wherever she lands. Then it hit her, no matter how weird it sounded, the world was actually a blast. The girl eats and says the fruit tastes worse lately, and the guy immediately leans in to ask what's different. They keep talking way too long, and the elder starts to sweat, wondering if he should cut the guy loose. Then the girl grits her teeth, decides not yet, and raises her staff. The girl tells him this is the final push and that she's not going to pull her punches while he studies her closely, not missing a single detail. She barrels into him with a barrage of projectiles, and the main character snaps into wind magic, then whips up a swirling whirlwind while she spams spell after spell, switching elements on the fly with no words at all. So instead of dodging, he decides to strike back. He fires off tempering magic and unleashes his own spell. The protagonist whips his fist forward, and the girl's eyes go wide. When he doesn't hit her, he smashes at her staff instead. The staff snaps in half and the shards tumble to the floor. Then the girl scoops one up and declares, "I'm out. I don't have any more of those." He blurts out what it is, and the girl grins. It's a magic stone. People soak it with elemental magic. You just add a tiny bit of power, and it instantly fires the magic on its own. People say this kind of thing is a magical item, almost like people can even make them. So the guy presses her for details, and then it hits the magic she used wasn't even hers. That's why she can unleash elemental magic nonstop while he's stuck with only recovery magic now. Because up until this point, she survived purely on desperate tricks like that. She vowed to smash his dreams the moment she saw he wouldn't do the same, but he shrugged off every sneaky blow, and with a bright smile, she said, he passed the exam and even congratulated the guy. Out of nowhere, the heroine bursts into joyful laughter, then she steps right up as the guy thanks her, and she gently rests her hand on his head. The girl gently runs her hand through his hair and tells him he's a good boy. And the guy freezes, instant embarrassment hits, his cheeks burning as she keeps praising him. Back then, people might have called him a demon king and feared the disasters he'd unleash, but none of that shook him. After 100 years of nonstop training, the payoff finally hit today. In the middle of a noisy crowd, a girl weaves through the chaos, people jabbering beside her until a big nosed man steps up and greets her with a grin. The girl demands he hand over all the fruits, and the man shoots back, asking if she's really about to dump that mountain of money on more fruit again. He quizzes her on why she's saying that, because word is the elf adores them, then she fires back, "Are you going to sell them?" And he nods, agreeing without hesitation. She's counting down to the day she finally meets him, then it hits her. This is the very girl the main character saved. A girl is picking berries into a basket, but it's actually the main character's mother, while his father stands right beside him, and he turns toward his parents. Reese shoots his parents a wave, grinning as he greets them, then Elder trots right beside him, and Reese proudly announces that he cleared Elder's exam. The parents go wide-eyed, start showering him with praise, and can't believe he's only 100 years old, while Elder stands there utterly convinced of Reese's skill. The mother beams and tells the boy to rest at home for like 10 years, yet the main character, with that awkward elven time sense, still panics and blurts that, no, he's getting out of here tomorrow. His mom tells her son, slow down, don't rush, because he's only 100 years old, and yeah, in her eyes, he's still a kid, while the neighbor's daughter has only just learned how to pick cuckoo fruits. After the exam, he finally got Rahav's approval so the outside world savvy guy could breathe, and you don't need to worry about the father overthinking that name. He asks if he's talking about Rahab Luli, and without meaning to, he's already picturing her, he knows her, like a little sister for now, at least, before he hits 20. At just 100 years old, he finally pushed into the neighboring forest for the first time. Rahav was already deep in restoration magic, because if Sal recognized him, he'd recognize his own son too. The father leans in and asks Reese if he's truly ready to step into the outside world. Then Reese blurts out a confident, yes. The parents exchange a sharp look. The father turns and walks off and tells Reese to wait while he comes back right away. Reese just stares after him, completely stunned. The mom tells him that before he walks out, she has to do something his mom did too. Then he blurts out, so I'm just supposed to do the same. She nods and tells him to sit right there, and he does while the elder watches the whole thing. She sneaks up behind him, snatches the hair clip out, and tells him he's just like her. She's always had beautiful hair too. Then she closes her hand and cradles the clip in her palm. He asks, what is it? And she leans in to explain that when she married his father, she was handed that talisman by the sacred tree, Yggdrasil. Reese tells her that if she ties it on, the sacred tree's power will always stand guard because she knows how much that means to her. The boy blurts to his mother, I'm already 100 years old, but she doesn't even hear him. She grabs him in a tight hug and demands he promise he won't leave this world before they do. The protagonist grips his mother's hand and swears she'll make her promise right, as her father screams and whips around to stare at Reese. The man jabs a finger at the boxes and tells his son, this is a 10-year stash of food. Reese blinks because inside are fermented and dried cuckoo fruits, kelp meat, and batfish. Then it hits him. His father has been hoarding meals for years, quietly setting everything up for the day he'll finally pass on. His mom tells him, you can't take it all with you. His dad panics, but Reese grins and says there's nothing to fear because his storage magic lets him pack everything away in a hyperdimensional warehouse. This is one of the movement magic tricks, send something into hyperspace and it comes out unscathed. No matter what you toss in, the father is over the moon. The mother immediately wants the same warehouse, and the elder shrugs like, that's ancient magic. Easy, this isn't even the hard one. Reese storms out, and his parents fight back tears, insisting they'll miss him because elf life stretches on forever. They can still live together, and the elder stands right nearby. He tried to say goodbye to Rahav, but she up and left way faster than he ever was in his past life. Next, he's heading straight for the Garland family. Outside the world's reach, the elves only talk to one family, the Garlands, and 7 years ago he swore to Garius, their leader, that they'd meet again so he could finally see Grill, who was sick back then. The protagonist strides ahead, spots where Yggdrasil's protective barrier finally cuts off, and then Swagger jumps right over it with total confidence. He stares up at the sky and realizes the weather is perfect for his journey, then he spots wolves closing in. Reese can't believe it. Failing's fire magic erupts, and a girl brandishing a flaming sword sprints right past him. He stands there, watching her take on the wolves, and his jaw drops when she wipes out every single monster in one brutal swing. Next, the girl drops to her knees in front of him, and the main character can't make sense of it. She tells him she waited 7 long years, then looks him straight in the eye, and suddenly he remembers her back when she was just a little girl. He's completely stunned, then points out the cross-shaped scar on her chest, and she's the same girl because years ago, he was the one who promised to meet her here in 7 years if she doesn't change her mind. All he'll have left are shaky, fragmentary memories of this moment. She says his words have always lit her path, and that's why she honed her power until she reached this level. And then the guy snaps, asking if she truly believed him or if that's exactly why she came here. She swears it happened when she was dying, he healed her, and she begged to get stronger. Then he cast magic that buried his memories in the darkest corner of her mind. But somehow, she still remembered the words she was never supposed to. She totally didn't see this coming. Then her memory jolts he's an elf, and she's been meaning to hand this over the moment they meet. So she hauls the box along, thinking, if he doesn't mind, it's his. Reese leans in and asks, can I peek inside? He pops the lid off the box and bam fruits spill into view, and she starts grinning because she's heard elves go wild for them. Even though he's never seen some of these before, there are fancy tropical fruits from the west and icy land harvests from the far north, and she grabs every single kind she can find from all over the world. The girl tells him to pick any fruit he likes, and then while the rumors fly that elves can't resist fruits, he drills Rahav's motives and demands to know how much money it took. She grits out that she burned through every single coin she ever earned as a mercenary. He's stunned, and the girl leans in, asking if that's enough for him. He says it's more than enough, but something's still gnawing at him. Sure, he doesn't know this world at all, yet she's weirdly innocent about it. Then he pulls out a hyperspace warehouse, and the girl's jaw drops in shock. She grabs his attention and asks, will you take me with you? Because she's an adventurer, and living on the move is all she knows. She can guide him, help him connect with people fast, and before you know it, the girl is right in front of him. He just stormed out of the elven settlement, clueless about what's beyond those walls because no other elves are anywhere around. If there's a human with him, that's a win. So he turns to her and asks if she'll cause him trouble. Everything she's done so far has all led to this moment. She wants to spend her whole life at his side, learn from him up close, and get stronger with every single day. He finally gets it. She's always spoken bluntly, straight from the start, and based on her own quick math, that's been around for roughly 40 years. She's stunned. She actually wants to travel with him for 40 whole years, and he's blown away by how deeply she feels. Even though he's only 40 years old, Reese Klein steps right up, offers his hand to the girl, says he's thrilled to meet her, invites her to travel together, and asks, what's your name? The girl freezes for a second, and the guy presses, what is it? She finally admits she doesn't have a name yet. The guild branded her anonymous, and the protagonist realizes the whispers about her have already crawled all the way to the elven settlement. She erupts out of nowhere, wipes out every monster in the blink of an eye, then vanishes again right when he finally realizes it's her. She turns to him and asks, could you give me a name? After he saved her back then, she got reborn, so now she's just begging him to finally give her a name, and she's been waiting for it for 7 whole years. For her, right then, everything suddenly felt like it mattered more than anything, and for a kid, especially a little girl, 7 years is practically a lifetime. He still remembers asking his mom why she called him Minoru. She told him she just wanted him to grow in his own time and reach his true potential, better than anyone else ever could. The main character blurts out Minori, and the girl standing in front of him jolts with shock. Then he leans in and asks what she thinks of the name. With a sweet grin, she clenches her fist and tells him, Minori, that's such a beautiful name. In his past life, he never managed to live up to what his mom demanded. But even without knowing if her dream would ever pay off, this girl kept waiting, training, and sharpening her powers. He tells them he's starting with the Garlands, the family who controls the borderlands. Minori nods and says she'll forge a route now, and this is his shot to prove himself, so he cracks open a hyperspace warehouse. He pulls out the fruit and takes a bite on the spot. One sharp taste, and he's hooked. He tells the girl exactly where to go, and she finally realizes she has to escape the forest first. He grins and says, we've got to go, and the other guy gives a small smile and nods along. In a crowded tavern, a girl stood up and demanded a 1-horned rabbit and 3 slugs, begging him to swap them for her. Then the folks behind her claimed it was anonymous, and the man snapped in fury that she'd been marked as a minor now. The men gawk in disbelief as the protagonist realizes, yeah, she's famous, and the girl smirks, saying this should be plenty to make it all the way to the border of Garland. Then one man snaps, asking if they're heading to Garius, because he owns his whole stretch of land. Ever since the last lord replaced Garius, things finally started looking up, the economy has been climbing, the guild is drowning in monster destruction orders, and even adventurers can't stop racking up solid coin for food. Then it hits him like a punch. 7 years are already gone. 3 solid weeks have dragged by since he left the village, and now the girl grabs Reese's attention. If they stick to this main road, they'll crash straight into the fortress of Kukule, ruled by the border count. He owes her everything, because he had zero clue what the outside world even looked like then. She tells him, "We're leaving this forest. The border is right ahead, where the fortress of Kukula stands, packed with monsters, and he knows he can't back down. He's the one who must protect the empire and the sacred forests." The protagonist spots the battered guys and tells Minor, "The closer we get to the fortress, the more wounded we'll find." Lately, everyone's whispering about a spike in monster attacks, so how is Garius still keeping his reputation spotless when the monsters keep coming faster than he can handle? The protagonist chomps the fruit, tells the girl the taste is a little off, and asks if she should go for it. Then she grabs it and blushes hard, wondering if she can really swallow something Reese can't. Then she bites in and lights up, saying it's absolutely delicious. Then Reese takes a bite and suddenly it's even better. For some reason, the fruit started tasting dull, so he snaps into action, casts evaluation magic, then dissects its composition from the inside out. It's 80 water, 12 sugar, 7 miasma, and the rest is just other stuff. Then the protagonist's jaw drops as he spots that miasma. The girl demands to know what it is, and the guy brushes it off like it's nothing, because he just wanted her to taste it. Her eyes brim with tears as she covers her face with both hands, while miasma, once a special particle found in demon tribe territory, has vanished from Earth ever since those tribes went extinct. The man's jaw drops because the other guy wants to meet Garius, one of the most ruthless, powerful aristocrats in the Ulu Empire, so he can't just waltz in and see him. He's got to tell him right away, because he's been holding this gate down for 5 years, remembering every face that slipped through, and not once has anyone like you ever shown up. Rage sparks in the girl's eyes as she snaps at him not to dare insult her, then right at the chaos. Reese shows up and demands, "Why's all this noise?" Garius leans in and tells Reese, "It's been ages," then grins, saying he's still himself, only now he's grown even more majestic, because it's been 7 long years since they last saw each other. Reese is stunned, while Minori stands there, chest puffed with proud fire. Garius swears he still remembers the promise he made to him. Back then, Reese insists he came to see him, and then it turns out Grillout showed up too. Grill cornered the guy and demanded to know if he'd passed the exam so he could escape the forest, then made it crystal clear if he wanted out, he'd have to deal with them first, and when the elf realized this was his chance, he nodded along. Garius thinks his father swore something too, then Reese drops the bombshell that he knows Garius and the old ruler, but unlike Garius, he's not cut from the same cloth. He hates conflict. The father's title is the God of War, an absolute legend, and when the girl asks what that's got to do with Reese, he doesn't hesitate. He's the first person I ever talked to. He's my friend. The moment he stepped out of the forest, his father was already talking about Reese. Then they'd pour sake and pass down the old traditions of life, but Reese couldn't shake the feeling that his father had forgotten the promise. He grins and pins it all on his father, then admits he forgot his own promise, and still he goes on sleeping like nothing happened. The protagonist spots a gaunt man, and Garius snaps, saying he's been wasting away like this for 5 years. He won't let a single soul come close. Convinced the only one left who might make his father happy is him. The protagonist rushes up to Grillet and blurts out, "Man, it's been ages since we last saw each other." 2 years back, this hard-as-nails military man held the line on his own, carving out a defense against monsters and robbers during the invasion. Then 5 years ago, he got found riddled with wounds, slipped into a coma, and kept fading, never waking up, not even once. Still, he managed to claim his seat in the government, and only because others never gave up did they finally manage to safeguard this land. His father was the one who battled and shielded him every day until the day he vanished, and the truth finally hit him. Now that he thought about it, he'd heard nothing but praise for Carius before showing up, but somehow, nobody ever mentioned how he got down with Grill. And he figured he shouldn't expose that reputation and scare everyone, so he kept swinging on his own, and then he clocked a nasty bruise on the guy's arm. The girl stares at the main character in pure confusion as he yanks the blanket off the man, then demands what kind of bruise this is. The boy begged the best doctors for answers, but even they couldn't crack it. Turns out, whatever grew out of his father doesn't just resist healing magic, it outright drives back even superclass restorative spells. Then the protagonist whips out evaluation magic again, breaking down the whole composition, and realizes the miasma is piled in at a whopping 91. The main character knew it instantly. This bruise was pumped full of miasmas, its content clocking a brutal 91, so the doctors were helpless, because miasmas can't be treated at all. The boy whips around to Garius and fires. "So you've tried everything yet?" And Garius shoots back, "Yeah." Reese leans in like she's caught a lie and snaps that this only means one thing. They haven't tried everything, and the next step is extreme restorative magic. He insists it's just a joke and can't be true. Then the recent shock hits, and the protagonist snaps back. Even if he wakes up, his life won't last because he's got only 2 years left. He demanded, "So you want to bring me back?" And the guy snapped back that his father always fought by himself, yet they still thanked him every time. Now, even with only 2 years left, he's got to tell his father the truth. The protagonist flashes a confident grin, declares he finally gets it, and then right away starts blasting magic. They say one ancient time, humanity finally hit its impossible goal, then stalled for decades afterward, until this one guy tore into restorative magic at an absolutely brutal, extreme level. Then he strikes with the light of a second birth, and the room erupts into blinding illumination as the spell's glow spills everywhere. Then the man's hand twitches, his eyes snap open, and Reese's face is right in front of him as he blurts, "Who are you?" The protagonist flashes a smile and tells him, "You're finally here. I've been waiting, just like I promised." On this day, the protagonist managed to rip his friend back from death just for a short time, and that brief miracle capped off a full century of relentless hard work. Suddenly, he realizes a man is standing right in front of him, and Garius has grown so much that he can't even process it. Because he's shocked out of his mind, then he blurts out that the guy kept his promise. Reese says he wants to hear everything from you too about the monster you battled before you got injured. He's convinced you were holding your ground against demonic monsters back then, but right after that, your memory turns foggy and blurry. The protagonist can't shake the fear. What if this is a memory control spell, planted from the other side? A guy leans in and asks if the man truly believes in demonic creatures, and the second fear hits him. He panics, demanding, "What are they like?" Reese says the stench of evil seems to hang over him, and he knows it can't appear without demonic power, so he offers to scrub it away and dig straight into his own memories. The protagonist lifts his hands up toward the man's head, then finally leans in and pushes for the procedure to begin. In his memories, someone swears an ordinary person kept fighting off their invasion until this was the final time. He swears he's got no spine for this torture, yet he says they can do it at will, but if they keep hitting them the same way as before, it won't finish the job because they'll cross over and strike from the other side. Once they finally catch him, they'll collect everything they planted before it sprouts into something worse. So clear out every roadblock now, before the demon lord comes roaring back. The main character realizes he's been through unspeakable horrors, yet the man shrugs it off like it's nothing if it ever got out that the demons people swore were just fairy tales are real. The world would crash into chaos, but there's a way out. The protagonist steps up and dares to meet him face to face like a true warrior. But will this showdown end up saving him? A legendary tale of a fallen wizard author and year lost to time begins when the Demon King suddenly surges with terrifying power in this world. No matter how fearless he was, nobody could even scratch the Demon King, and before anyone knew it, the world crumbled fast, with over half the territories falling under his reign. Around the same time, in a quiet village, a boy was stuck with zero talent for the 4 elemental magics, while everyone mocked him, but that didn't crush his dream. He burned with one goal: become an adventurer, and he trained harder than anyone alive. Armed with 4 loyal companions, each one a walking spellbook, he awakens a power inside himself that feels downright unreal. With this power, the outcast kid and his crew crushed the Demon King, and suddenly everyone started calling him brave. The protagonist presses him again, so this brave man legend really spreads through people, right? And the man nods, saying, "Yeah, there has to be a tale out there." Oh, and Reese learned about it in the library back in the Elven village at least. That's what he remembers because they said the factor, this power is unreal, and make no mistake, demons are hunting the human race, hunting for souls with enough courage to stand their ground. So we have to find them first because they don't even realize what they've already stumbled onto yet. The man grins and says that from how things sounded, the people with courage would definitely come here. 20 years ago, he inherited this land from his father, and ever since, monster attacks have exploded in numbers now that he's fallen ill. Adventurers from outside swarm in for the reward, like it's the last chance they'll ever get. The protagonist blurts out that, by the legend, only someone with the courage factor is supposed to be here. Then the guy shoots up, and the man gapes at him, completely baffled. Reese tells him he'll be thrown straight into the front lines, and the man nods like he gets it. Then Reese promises he won't have to fight alone anymore because he's finally stepped out into the world. For the next 900 years, the last thing he could tolerate was having the world seized by a tribe of demons. The man claims that this is his wife's self, and the protagonist cuts in. About their childhood friend Gillette promised he'd introduce them. Then his wife fires back. "Did you swear that to the elf?" And he nods, saying, "Yeah, before the wedding." Sylph tells him her husband is deeply grateful for every bit of help he's given, and no matter how many times they say thank you, it still won't feel like it's ever enough. He calls his wife pious and tells her she's sweet. Then he recalls what he told Reese he was about to propose to his childhood friend, and he'd introduce them both. Reese sighs that life expectancy barely cracks 60 years, and Grill snaps back that she's praised him way too much. He catches himself thinking back to Grill from his youth. Then he watches her at the table, eating in perfect silence. Grill turns and praises his wife's cooking as the most delicious thing she's ever tasted, and she beams her thanks right back to him. Self locks eyes with Minori and demands the truth about their relationship. Then the girl springs to her feet and declares, "I'm your wife." After she tells everyone, "Call me Minori," the three of them freeze in shock and blurt out, "Wait, so what about your wife?" Relay asks the man if he's found a bride, yet he snaps back, "No," then shoots a confused look at Minori, and she declares that from this moment on, they'll be together. Minori blurted out that she wanted to get stronger, so he brought her along. Trade made simple, she'd explain humans, and he'd train her. After that, the girl sank into despair until Sylph stepped in and offered to teach her how to cook a few dishes, totally blindsiding her. She blurts out that all she knows is how to fight, no prep, no plan, nothing fancy, and then shrugs like it's no big deal. "Come on, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach," she says, calling it ancient wisdom, and the main character is left totally baffled by what's going on. She tells Reese she'll do it just to make him happy, and she vows to go all out, no excuses. Grillette blasts the idea that a child can't be born from an elf and a human, and Reese shoots back, "So what are you saying?" Then, Grillette turns around and asks Reese what's really going on with him. He insists he doesn't feel anything for Minori, and Grilla snaps that it's a complete waste of time. The protagonist realizes Minori is doomed to die long before him because she's human. Next to Minori, the protagonist blurts that they're already heading out, firing off questions to his friend as he grips the stroller's address. Garius points them toward Vestera. The force of the great circle squeezed between Kukule's fortress and the sacred monster forest warns that it's all too easy to get lost in there and tells them to stay sharp. Looks like the adventurers are mostly deep in the forest, wiping out monsters as they charge toward Kukule Fortress. Meanwhile, Minori isn't there, and they sometimes hunt the ones that make it to the fortress, so this spot lets them keep tabs on both sides, the adventurers and the monsters. Relay told everyone there was a hollow house deep in the forest, and he thought it might be the perfect stopover to track down the owner of the courage factor, but could that even work? If the clues match that fairy tale, then there's no way to figure out what they're hunting someone who can't use the 4 elemental magics unless that magic is right in front of them. If he had evaluation magic, he could spot the factor in a person, but he'd still have to keep testing until he finally unearthed the adventurer. The girl grins and tells him it's super cool, then leans in and asks, "So you're saying you can really find that factor?" She can't shake the feeling that this is exactly the kind of move she'd expect from Reese, pure evaluation magic from a composition analysis. It all comes down to that reincarnated otherworlder, because this time, his new birth smells like the kind of otherworld power people call transcendence. The protagonist tells her they've been trapped in this forest for years, maybe for her entire short life, so she should turn back now, but she's already dug in and won't change her mind. For the next 7 years, she'll keep following him exactly the way she always has, and the guy can't believe his eyes. She tells the truth that when she said it to him, she meant it with her whole heart. Real happiness is staying right beside him, and being strong enough to stand there. The girl flashes a smile and straight up tells him she's made up her mind she wants to be by his side for the rest of her life. She shyly blurts out that she'll never let him go until he finally admits he hates her. The main character snaps his own face with a slap, jolts awake like, "That close? What does that even mean?" Reese tries to steady his breathing, and the girl snaps toward him. She says she found this place, a house sitting about a 6-hour hike from the Kukule Fortress. In a forest like this, it feels like Mr. Grill's old crew turned this building into a vacation hideout, back when monsters were scarce. So tell me, what kind of aristocratic villa is this supposed to be? First they're blown away. This place looks downright luxurious until the door literally falls off, and the guy just shrugs and says, "Yeah, it's falling apart, it just needs cleaning first." Minori froze in shock, and the boy dashed over to ask what was wrong. Then she jabbed her finger straight at him. She stared in awe as he conjured everything around him with magic. Heartbroken and shaken, she realized this was the end. She'd never be able to help him again. At 78 years old, the elf mastered spirit magic by signing temporary contracts with spirits and yanking their power when he needed it. He clocked it again. His friend was clearly upset, but she snapped back fast to swear none of it was true. In the end, the hero just had to land the final move, then summon a protective barrier with the words of the ancient tree's blessing, Yggdrasil, Sulph. Reese started digging into the earth, and Minori couldn't help but get curious about what he was up to. The hero shoved a tiny tree sprout into the ground, and the very next second, it exploded into a towering, full-grown tree. That protective screen turned the whole building into something you couldn't see from the outside. Monsters and demons couldn't even lay eyes on it. Only the owner of the courage factor was able to see it. Minori was fully convinced once again that the hero could pull off literally anything. The girl told the elf, "I'll share what I know about people if you train me to become stronger." And when he agreed, he hauled her along for the journey. The young man said he was grateful she was close by, but deep down, he knew she couldn't really help him with anything. Minori figured he could handle everything solo. Going with him was pure selfishness. She didn't even know what her own parents looked like, yet she was living worse than a servant. Right when that girl's life was one mistake away from being snatched away, she somehow got saved. 7 years went by, and she wasn't a slave anymore. No one touched her like before. Minori fought to survive on her own, determined not to waste the life she'd been handed. Every single day she showed up there, and by the 7th year of the promise, she was still waiting for Riz Blanc, gripping tight to the memories that refused to let go. She even wanted to blurt out that her wish had finally come true, yet she refused to stop there. Minori's whole body buzzed with one goal: she wanted to do everything she could, not because she wanted attention, but so she could stand shoulder to shoulder with him and fight beside him. The girl yelled, "Riz, once you track down the owner of the courage factor, are we heading to the demon lord?" The boy dreamed he could do it, but courage failed him. He couldn't bring himself to beat the demon lord. Still, everything could flip if the young man tracked him down, because then, under that protection, they'd all grow stronger than ever. He couldn't say how long the hunt would take, but deep down, he was willing to throw everything he had at it. Anything to dodge the demon ruler's sweet talk and keep from giving in. She froze with no words. But her faith in Riz's success never wavered. She just had one more thing she needed to add. Before time ran out, she hurried to the hero and begged him to train her. The elf stared in disbelief at her request because this girl already had crushing strength, and she was mowing down monsters like it was nothing. But that girl was rock solid, sure of what she wanted, just like the hero. She was desperate to reach the demon lord. The hero broke into a smile, and in that moment, everything clicked, showing him exactly why his friend was desperate to get stronger. After that, their training days stacked one after another between brutal drills, non-stop exercises, and a ton of other chaos. 2 whole years vanished in the blink of an eye. The boys sprinted into the forest heart when the girl spotted 5 monsters lurking off to their 3 o'clock. 4 of those monsters were B rank, and the last one, that one was an A rank beast. Minori cracked out appraisal magic and started sniffing magical signatures, and Riz just smirked. He already knew the answers, then he only asked one thing: was she hunting the toughest enemy out there? His words pumped fresh confidence into his friend, and she bolted forward, urging the elf to trust her. Then the hero flashed a smile. The young hero stepped up and took the rest on himself. Massive, chicken-like monsters charged straight at him, barreled past Minori without even a glance, and when they finally closed in, he ripped through them with wind magic and a mantis-style slash. The young man couldn't wrap his head around it. Those monsters dodged the girl who wanted to kill them and just bolted right past her. A violent clatter snapped out of the forest, and then a rampaging bear burst toward the friends, way more terrifying than Minori. The girl snapped her fingers and blasted her sword with the deadliest fire magic, casting the top-tier charm spell on it right away. The beast let out a brutal roar and charged straight into the attack, so the girl had to fire off her super-level charm to survive. Flame swallowed the battlefield as Minori raised her Phoenix Flame sword. Then a massive bear lunged in with a crushing paw, so she met it head-on with her blade. Minori smashed the beast with a crushing strike, then exhaled a heavy breath as the dust settled. Riz immediately praised her for it, like she'd just saved the day. She was over the moon. She finally pulled off super-level magic, all on her own. Even the craziest magic couldn't stop the bear from getting wiped out. And that's when Minori finally became terrifyingly strong. The hero shot his hand out to help his friend up, grinning because next time, she'd be able to fight even after throwing superclass magic. Now it was just time to hammer her body into shape. The girl tapped on her own rhythm, and the young man suddenly felt something shift in her right there, out of nowhere. While she roamed that forest for 2 long years, she somehow grew into herself, mature beyond her mere 20 years. The hero stared at his palm like it held a clue, then Minori burst in with a tray of food. Sylph's secret recipe number 33, Oyakodon, made with cocatores. That elf dug into the dish and lit up because it was so damn delicious, and over the last 2 years, Minori's cooking skills kept leveling up too, all thanks to Sylph. Rios tried to dodge the topic and shot a question about how things were going at Kukuli Fortress, and his friend said even though not much had changed, monster attacks kept climbing, yet nobody had heard a word about that courage factor or the demon lord. The hero kept replaying it in his head because even in Grill's memories, not a single clue about the demon tribe he'd seen ever showed up. He knew they weren't going to be moving ahead anytime soon. Right in the middle of their chat, a carrier pigeon tore through the air from Kukule Fortress, and Minori dashed over, declaring she'd be back in no time. While she was gone, the young man leaned back in a daze and thought, if a homing pigeon is basically magic, then mastering how it works would be wildly fascinating for me. The girl burst into the room, yanked the door wide open, and staggered in, gasping for air and trembling with worry. She gripped that scrap of paper like it was burning, and the young man, seeing her panic, blurts out what in the world happened. While his friend tries to tell him the truth, it was Griet who was talking. The young man already knew his friend's life was ticking down 2 years, and that was it. They ditched walking and went for teleportation, and boom, they landed at Garland's mansion. Then the young man shouted for Garius, and once Garius spotted them, he thanked them for coming. Out of sheer politeness, he shifted his focus to his companion. Reese turned toward Weiss and wished him a good evening. The kid shot back the same warm vibes, and the boy immediately clocked how much he looked like his mom and dad. Then the man cracked the door open just a slit, saying the patient was out cold, so he only got to peek in for a second. The boy sprinted to his grandfather, yelling that Reese had finally come to see them. The young man strode up to the bed and greeted Grill, but the calm on his face stunned him, like that piece didn't belong there. Garius told us that in the last 2 years, nothing had shifted at all, and somehow he still found time to sit down and talk with his father. He finally got the chance to pick up the exact management skills he'd been chasing for ages from him. But the real miracle for him came when his beloved son was born. Garius burst into tears, thanking Reese for everything he'd done. The hero's heart sank with crushing sadness, like 2 years had vanished overnight. But when he looked around, he realized every family member had already made peace with the patient's condition, so even Grill had. The elf clutched the man's hand, feeling his heartbeat fluttering weakly as the light in his life steadily dimmed and slipped away. The moment Reese landed in their world, Grillet was the first one to call him a friend. The hero stared at the man's hand, and suddenly it felt way smaller, like it had shrunk right out of his reach. The guy spun toward Garius, ready to blurt out what he had to say. Reese wanted to get something from that man, and the crazy part was, he'd do literally anything to help. The hero begged for permission to speak to the sick man, and the young man was stunned by how badly he wanted to talk. Even knowing this dude could pull off anything, he couldn't stop wondering how exactly was he doing it. The elf clasped his hands in front of him, leaned in, and snapped that he'd be tearing into death magic, necromancy, ancient power that wrestled with life and death, the same kind necromancers used long ago. If Reese could only catch Grill for a split second, he could hand him a message, so Reese lunged to Garius and demanded what he wanted to tell his father. The young man flashed a grin, because if that happened, he'd be wildly grateful to the elf. The hero snapped and started weaving death magic. The next second, he was suddenly thrown into empty space, just him, the road, and the gate waiting ahead. Light clots whirled around him, streaming straight for that tiny, half-open crack like souls sprinting toward the afterlife, and the boy watching already knew what waited on the other side of the gate. Then, out of nowhere, a voice snapped behind him, and the young man instantly recognized it. He spun around and froze. Grillet stood there in full armor, great axe in hand, and just as the hero stared, the man blurted that he couldn't get into that place yet. The hero told him to chill, he'd be back in a flash, but he needed it. Said fast, and that caught his friend off guard. So Reese broke it down with magic. He could yank his soul into a mortal body for a brief moment, and still, Grillet just couldn't bring himself to believe it. With the necromancer's ancient magic, resurrection became possible, so the greatest ones could briefly drag the demon kings and the king of dragons' predecessors back into the modern world. The hero knew he'd overpromised, but he still prayed he could figure out a way to get his comrade back. He just had to wait a little, and then the young man heard a roaring laugh. He grinned like he already knew Reese could pull off anything, and honestly, that confidence left him no choice. He had to agree. When the hero showed up at his deathbed, joy hit him like lightning, yet even then, Grill swore he'd had enough time. The boy tried to object, but Grill shut him down, and with the hero's help, he held the fortress against the dark and spent his final years wrapped up with his family. He even got to lay eyes on his grandson, so yeah, he had zero regrets. Reese leaned in and asked if it was really true, then the guy finally confessed there was one thing he couldn't shake from his mind. His life got tangled with monsters that had completely spiraled out of control. If a demon lord popped back to life and started tearing everything apart, humans would be wiped out in a blink. So Grill pushed Reese to dig deep for courage and take down the demon lord. An old friend leaned in and asked the young man to handle this mission because the fate of humanity hung on it. The kid hesitated for a beat, then finally nodded and made good on his promise, and the moment he did, Grill's face lit up with a grin. Reese being with Garius meant he wouldn't have anything else to worry about. Yet no matter how hard he tried, his consciousness slipped away. The knight still remembered that first time the elf reached out his hand, and from that moment on, nothing about it ever changed, except how impossibly pale and beautiful it looked now. Here's the deal, elven aging doesn't kick in until they hit 800 years, and this elder was speaking from the fact that he'd lived every single one of those years. Grilly grinned at his friend and thought, for you, this time together must have felt like a tiny miracle. Tears spilled down his face, and the man thanked his comrade for caring. Reese wiped at his eyes with his sleeve and blurted that he had something to say too. Tears streamed down the elf's whole face as he thanked his old friend for everything, then wished him a peaceful rest. Grillette broke into a wide grin and laid a parting hand on the hero's shoulder when Reese was finally old enough to cross over. The man promised to track him down at a local brewery and wait, but he made one thing crystal clear. Take your time, and with that, the knight marched straight for the gate. Soon enough, Grillet Garland finally died at 58 after 20 brutal years of fighting and guarding the fortress of Kukule against waves of demonic monsters. The war god slipped away in his sleep, watched over by his own family, an end that felt perfectly right. Perched on the building's roof, the elf stared down and couldn't believe how fast 2 whole years had vanished. Even now, the boy could still feel Grilla's rough, wrinkled hand clinging to his skin. And he couldn't forget what his friend said, nothing had changed at all, not even a bit, and it stayed just as beautiful as ever. Reese froze, staring at his palm like it held a secret. Then Minori's voice cut through the air. He snapped out of his thoughts and spun back around. His friend was calling him in, inviting him inside. She slipped her hand into his, and right then, the hero felt her palm burn warm in his, glowing soft, beautiful, and pale like pure light. Suddenly, he yanked his hands away and Minori froze, then snapped, Reese, are you okay? The young man flashed a grin, said he was totally fine, and thanked her. Then he stepped forward alone without even taking her hand because his very first friend in this world was already gone. The hero swore to Minori straight to her face that he would absolutely smash the Demon Lord. No matter how many hundreds of years crawl by, or even if that bravery gets handed to someone else, or the Demon Lord comes back to life, the hero and his friends have one job: stop him. From this point on, he had to push through and finish what he started, no backing down, not even for a second. This is exactly what an elf would go for if they could, no matter that they lacked the nerve to take down the demonic ruler. The girl's eyes sharpened with resolve, and she hurried after her friend, swearing she'd never let them face it alone. Reese had to leave behind a living proof of his friend and carry on his legacy, convinced his life wasn't wasted. Then 3 years slid by, and Minori geared up again for dinner with special dish number 48. Fish simmered in white wine, and the hero tore into it with pure joy. While his friend's cooking magic kept leveling up, she beamed and told him she'd tuned the recipes until every bite hit even harder. That young man figured she decided to cook up her own recipes alongside the Selphas, and she still remembered what the Selphas warned her: take care of the ones who take care of her. 1 whole year after Grill's death, she slipped out of this world. One day, when Minori ran into her again, the girl pulled out a brand new recipe and showed it off right there. And from that point on, her friend kept crafting more and more signature dishes of her own. So the hero had to sit tight, honestly. He didn't mind, and when later night finally rolled in, the girl was already knocked out, sound asleep. Reese stared at Minori, knocked out cold, and couldn't stop thinking about how much she'd grown. She'd be 22 by year's end. But when they first met, Minori was still just a kid. He watched time rip past everyone, and it crushed him. He couldn't stand the thought of Minori getting the same brutal end his first friend did. The elf's ears rang with wounded cries, and the young man snapped upright on the bed, so the attack had actually started. Then chaos erupted across the forest magic, flaring left and right, and the hero snapped to it, firing off evaluative magic to get a clear, accurate read on what was really going on. Suddenly he spotted it. Boom! They'd found it. At last! Then the girl jolted awake and demanded what happened. The guy sprinted toward her, yelling with pure joy that they'd finally tracked down the owner of the Courage Factor. Sometime before the discovery, the boy was clawing his way up the mountain, yanking a heavy hiking backpack up behind him with every desperate step. The group commander fumed with indignation. How could he be stuck paying a nobody like him? If he couldn't swing a job as a baggage handler, the boss hauled out a threat and promised to shove him into a better fitting role. His legs started to shake from the strain, then he finally got to stop, because the young man couldn't even cast magic. And if the young man doesn't obey the team leader's orders, he'll start demanding compensation, so the boy clenched his jaw and swung his leg back over his shoulder. Again. He tried to lie to himself, saying this was just another normal training session. He shouted for his comrades to halt because stomping through the forest at night was straight up too dangerous. Lately, a creepy fog started rolling out of the forest at night, and the young man insisted it was way safer to wait until daytime because people had been seeing terrifying, powerful monsters again. But Luke didn't think they'd stayed around for long. Lulala shot back with a sudden yes to the commander, saying Salala was just as eager to finish the mission fast and bolt back home. The girl with glasses shot back, Luke's right, and totally agreed. The boy let out a breath and gave in to the pressure, then pushed for a safer route and started hunting for a map only for the commander to snap. Shut up. Every single member in that crew was B rank, and that young guy should have known it. Luke thought that if a porter couldn't use magic, he should have shut his mouth and kept quiet. The crew pushed forward, and the boy clenched his teeth, forcing himself to calm down and fight with everything he had, because deep down, he knew he had to get stronger. Step by step, walking turned brutal, then the fog surged thicker, and Luke started cursing under his breath. In the pitch black, countless pairs of eyes tracked the adventurers, and the commander panicked, desperate to figure out where these monsters had crawled from. Everyone could tell these weren't ordinary monsters at all, and the bespectacled girl clung to one desperate hope that they'd just be C-rank beasts, like a magical snake or a boar. Luke slammed the brakes, ripped open a pocket of salt with advanced water magic, then launched a water cannon blast only for the monsters to swat it out of the air and stop him cold. That hit didn't scratch the monster at all. Only A-rank monsters could even lay a hand on magic. Solala and Lulala hurled their spells, but the creatures didn't even flinch. Luke went wide-eyed. Every guy on their side was B-ranked, yet the monsters, they were only C-ranked, and still, they had no choice but to bolt. Creatures came surging after them. Panic slammed into the adventurers as the pursuit never let up, and a sinister black aura seeped out of the fog. The girl blurted out that it was Mana, and the carrier snapped back that these monsters were exactly the ones Jin had been talking about. She tried to argue with Luke, begging him to have taken the warning seriously from the very beginning. The commander threw every scrap of blame onto his companion since he'd ignored the offer too. He had zero right to bring charges, yet this wasn't the time to start a fight, because one quarrel would put them on the radar and get them both killed. The young man urged them to hunt for a way back to the fortress, warning the mess would only get worse, but Luke flashed a grin and shut it down because in the commander's head, the moment still hadn't arrived. He leaned in and basically told them their crew had been hauling around dead weight for years, and it was finally time to dump that trash. Carol watched the young man whip around, confused, while the leader just kept pushing his point like the argument mattered more than the fact that they'd lose their things, even if they could scrape together replacements later, and when Carol tried to reason with Luke, it backfired hard. After her righteous assault, the commander stepped up and offered to take the carrier's spot himself. Then the girl said nothing at all, just pressed her lips like a verdict. And that was all it took. The young man begged the commander to believe him if they followed the same trail where the tiny animals fled the monsters, they could make it out too. Luke dismissed them out of hand, scoffing at someone who couldn't even cast magic like that alone proved they didn't deserve to live. All his life, that guy clung to one burning dream, becoming an adventurer, and when the leader finally brought him into the team, it was only because they'd grown up together, but no matter how far they traveled, Jin kept dragging everyone down. The kid nearly choked on disbelief. Luke didn't want to burn a treasure like that on something cheap. But hey, this time it meant his childhood friend might finally matter. The commander unleashed a deadly mix of two-element magic water and earth, and with a flick of power, he summoned a swamp straight under Jin's feet. Crushed by the heavy backpack, the guy stumbled, hit the swamp with a splash, and immediately started sinking into the muck. He grilled Luke again about what he'd done, but Luke went stone silent, no answer at all. The leader summoned Solala and Lulala, laid out his whole plan, and said they'd use that useless guy as bait just to slip out and escape. The young man fought to reach Carol, but she turned away too, even as it hurt. Then the whole team bolted out of there, leaving him stranded alone. The young man dug his nails into the dirt, still clinging to the crazy hope that they could all be saved together. The fog monster surged closer, and the boy's heart sank. If only he had magic. Maybe he could finally save people just like others. Ever since he could remember, he dreamed of becoming an adventurer. He also craved the open road hunting monsters, spreading courage and guarding smiles on every face he met. Jin always believed nothing on Earth could top how cool he thought this was. Magic mattered more than anything for adventurers, and the one guy in that room couldn't use it at all. By the time they hit 15, magic would basically click on like a switch right when their mana surged to its peak at 20. Jin's childhood friends, those he once teamed up with, are getting stronger at a downright terrifying pace, yet Jin himself stays stuck, like he's frozen in place. Even when everything went sideways, he refused to quit his dream since he couldn't use magic. He slammed into sword training and hunted for every scrap of info, determined to be useful to his friends. Jin couldn't even touch the basic magic tools everyone else treated like nothing, so no matter how hard he tried, he was always outmatched by people who could actually do that. Over time, that forbidden spark in his chest kept growing so strong he couldn't even dare to hope or dream. The snake and the boar were already breathing down Jin's neck, but even with danger screaming in his ears, his heart still burned, with one goal, becoming a cool adventurer. The magical snake snapped up a sulfur sphere and a dark aura spilled out straight for the boy. Right when Minori burst in and slashed with the black flame sword at the very last second. She hurled back the snake's dark magic, and that savage resistance bought her just enough time to breathe. Jin stared in stunned silence as the stranger suddenly showed up, and right on cue, Reese and her friend burst in before it was too late. Rushing up, the elf snapped that they were almost out of time and then declared they'd handle the magical boar themselves. The beast let out a blood-chilling roar, then charged in like it meant to tear its target apart. While everyone else watched, the hero ripped open with super magic fire and wind casting the dragon's breath, and then the dark creature shot up into the sky. The boy gaped at Reese, totally shocked he never thought he'd run into an elf. Minori told her friend it had been ages since they had faced monsters strong enough to shrug off their spells. For the hero, this was the perfect chance to sharpen his skills and level up fast. He dared her to take down a magical snake with no more than 5 super spells, and without hesitation, his friend snapped, "Sure, I'll do it." And then the elf told her, "Don't fret about Trap Gina, I'll handle it myself, I'll keep her safe." Minori shot a furious, unhappy look, muttered that she wished Reese would protect her instead, and then despite it all, she still charged off to fight that snake. The hero charged up to the captive and instantly saw the truth. His own comrades had ditched him the moment they realized he couldn't cast a single spell, like the adventurers team was shockingly blind to his suffering. The elf knew for sure that if the boy couldn't cast magic, he'd have to forge himself from the ground up, body and mind, because Jin always had faith that one day she'd awaken inside him, so he trained without rest. The boy still couldn't wrap his head around how the elf knew, so the hero snapped his finger at him and set it straight. His own stubborn persistence was what forged him into a brave young man. Reese didn't just brush it, he unleashed healing magic with Saint Smile. Jean Fritz, just 17, lit up for real because the one carrying the coat courage factor had turned out to be someone like him, and then his whole life flipped the moment he ran into an elf. The boy stared in shock as his battered legs knitted back to full health on the spot. No potions, no delay. That must have been one of the elves from those old legends his new acquaintance felt straight out of the tales. Reese didn't even spare a glance at the wounded man's talk. He stared at the backpack and couldn't stop wondering why every club member had to let someone else haul their share of the luggage. Then the hero cheered Jin's name, praising him for staying right with the group, shouldering a brutal load and powering through uneven forest paths without falling behind. Then the elf leaned in and demanded to know if the boy had really never once used magic. Yet the young man bowed his head, crushed with sadness. Jin knew everyone usually hauled that kind of luggage with magical tools, but he was born without a shred of magic and he didn't even try to hide it. The boy couldn't even swing a real, specialized magic tool, and when the hero watched, he knew the truth in every word, because deep in his body, he sensed 0 magical manifestations. But when he saw those young arms and legs perfectly trained, he realized it wasn't luck at all. That kid had fought his way into skill since he couldn't rely on magic. Suddenly his hands started to shake. If only he were stronger, they never would have left him behind. Jin didn't blame his comrades for abandoning him. He pinned everything on his own weak strength. And Reese could tell that this kid really had the power to fully grow into what he was meant to become. Then the elf leaned in and told the boy the truth. He had the real gift to become a terrifyingly powerful adventurer, and honestly, the hero was the one pushing that future into motion. Klein wasn't about to hound Jean if he'd already lost the fire to become one. He shot his hand out toward Fritz and said, in no uncertain terms, "If you still want to get stronger, grab on." A childhood dream becoming a feared, powerful adventurer who protects everyone's smiles swept through the young man's mind like a thunderclap. With his head up, he insisted he still wanted to be just like that, then tears blurred his eyes and Jin shot forward, grabbing the outstretched hand. Reese clocked it instantly. This boy and Minori were fueled by pure, unshakable determination, and they were still so young. He even started to feel like his old self didn't stand a chance against them. Then they traded names, and right in the middle of it, everything got cut off. The girl snapped that the magical boar was charging straight at them. Fritz's stomach dropped when he saw the beast's fur bristling with thorns, and he realized this was strengthening magic, supercharging it with every second. Klein copied that move. He pumped up his arm with the magic beast fist, then fired off his enchanting magic lightning. With 2 totally different magic styles, the elf slammed a thunder fist into his own hand, sparking with power. He told Gina to stay put, then just watch, no questions. The boar charged in, and Reese stepped out to meet it head on because 100 years of his training had finally brought him to this moment. The next second, he slammed the beast right in the head so hard lightning cracked around him, and Fritz just stared, stunned at how powerful his new companion was. Then it hit him, according to the legends, elves could only cast restoration magic. Those race skills blew his mind. Then the boar was handled, and Reese casually told Jin to head to Minori until a voice snapped from behind them, and the person who owned it left him stunned. Right when they turned around, a thick wall of fog slammed into view, and from inside it burst that same furious voice, Baffled that one of the reclusive elves had ended up here, Reese's blood ran cold. He knew that tone. It was the exact voice he had heard in Greylay's memories. Apparently, it was that magical beast then. Out of nowhere, the clock started swelling, warping its shape as if it had a mind of its own. The elf caught that brutally thick miasma, and his worry spiked. He couldn't stop wondering if Jean could really handle it. Even if it nearly crushed him, he somehow stayed awake and conscious. Rihis decided to welcome the uninvited guest anyway, only to realize the hero could still hear that voice. And all the "glad to see you" in the world wouldn't help. A full 10 years back, this monster crashed into Grillet Garlanda at Kukure Fortress and tore the place apart. But the thing looked completely different now, and our hero swore it had to be dark magic. And yeah, he couldn't stop himself from digging deeper. Turns out this creature had been hanging around for a long time as a disembodied presence. And compared to its old self, it looked noticeably weaker. The monster finally admitted it inside the mausoleum hidden deep in Latal's sacred forest. His soul was trapped and sealed away. When he got summoned again, he woke up trapped inside this pathetic vessel before this. The only thing keeping him alive was the mana the Demon King's direct subordinate had been feeding him. Reese had heard rumors about this mausoleum, and then he read the truth. Insanely powerful divine beasts were sealed inside. That has to mean one of those divine beasts is trapped inside the magical katana. That Demon King lackey had to be absolutely loaded with mana so much that he could chain a divine beast soul to a magical beast body. And the hero, hungry for answers, casually asked when the Demon Lord was going to come back. The boar shot back that he'd heard it too, that this whole thing was going to kick in within 3 years. This sudden turn stunned the young man, and the beast secretly prayed that once the king showed up, it could finally ditch this miserable body. The elf grinned. This option only worked for the monster if it didn't fully fuse with the magic boar's body. The beast had to get what Reese meant 10 years ago. It was far from the magical creature, but now it was closing in fast, and even its misty, incorporeal body started to warp into a boar right in front of them. The elf only spoke up because the creature's clock was finally ticking down, and when it faced that brutal truth, the monster erupted in a savage rage screech. Rage-fueled, the boar charged in for another strike, and the hero yanked Jin out of the way by his collar just in time. Then he snapped, "You all right?" And the young man answered, "Yeah, I'm fine," but the real shock hit him how easily that magical beast spilled every crucial detail. Klein finally admitted the truth. He only pulled it off by hitting him with illusion-type magic and the mouth of truth. And Jin was honestly stunned that the elf even managed to land it. Reese felt the boar's very power start to crumble, and he knew no matter what divine beast it claimed to be there had to be a crack he could strike right into. The beast practically roared it. Yep, that elf's hunch was dead on. A demon's mana can snap and run out at any moment. After all these years, that demon still hadn't shown up yet. The boar's life hung in his hands, so he had no choice but to obey and grit his teeth through it. Klein slammed appraisal magic on the creature, and boom, its name was Vritra. Draped in darkness itself, then a spell snapped into place to forge it a real physical body, and the one casting it was Wakwa Karma, the acting commander of the Demon King's army. Now, Reese finally figured out who that shadowy Demon Lord minion with limitless mana really was. He confronted Vritra, furious after the beast had trapped him inside his own body, and Vritra couldn't believe it when he heard the elf say his name. For Klein, it was simple as day take on someone weaker, and appraisal magic would squeeze out even more secrets from the target. After a moment of hard thinking, the hero stepped up and struck a deal with the boar. Reese was so locked in on the moment that he was about to unleash his mana to drag Vritra's real body back. The beast still couldn't wrap its head around the real purpose, but the young man kept going, laying out the second half of the bargain because if the boar agreed, he'd make it stop hunting adventurers to serve the Demon King's army. Jin froze in stunned silence while he listened, and inside his head, all he could think was how the heck an elf could even believe something like this was possible. The young man ripped his strength wide open in front of everyone, flashing the exact amount of mana he had. Then Vratra finally had no doubt left, because that kind of power still wasn't going to keep his real body alive. The beast let out a ripping screech, and he just couldn't pin down what was wrong with this weird elf's mana because he could match Vakva's output with zero trouble. The hero waved it off. Don't panic. It was just a measly fifth of his full magical power, and the shock had somehow twisted Vritra into a magical boar. Then the beast eyed Reese with pure distrust, demanding to know if he'd be called to do something back and if he'd actually get to soar freely in the sky again. Klein promised him, "As long as you don't mess with other people, I won't step into your life at all." He figured he could handle chatting with a boar once every 100 years. Richard didn't hesitate. He shot back an answer, swore with his life, and locked in that agreement. Right then, the soul sealed inside the magic boar started ripping its way back to its true form. Instead of the beast, a massive dragon crashed into the scene. Jin froze in fear at its terrifying presence, and the hero uncovered Vritra's real form, and trust me, it was insanely cool. That body was perfect, made for war. The creature was 58 years old, and when its caster changed, it transformed too, shedding its form until it looked like an ancient dragon, inside and out. Klein leaned in and asked the dragon, "So how do you feel right now?" Now he felt unstoppable because he could fly again and go anywhere he wanted. Vritra would have had to wait while his soul finally settled into the new body, but thankfully, that elf had zero plans to croak for the next 9 centuries. He swore he'd hand over mana anytime the young man needed it, and from the way he talked, the dragon realized elves outlived dragons by a mile. Dragons only survive about 500 years, so he couldn't possibly repay his savior. Even the priest had to admit it. His new friend was weirdly thoughtful and on the ball. The boy practically begged the dragon just as thanks, please take some of the tasty fruit he'd picked up on his journey or anything else he'd found, and while sharing that much mana wouldn't be a hassle for him, the young man still did whatever he wanted, at his own call. The hero had wiped every shred of his old life clean, yet he was sure Vritra would never forget him after he helped reclaim his body, and that proved all those 100 years of training finally paid off. Draco found elves downright bizarre, but he swallowed the weirdness and still demanded his gratitude. He demanded the hero's name, and the young man shot back, "It's me." Like the dragon himself, then he vowed he'd live in the outside world on his own terms, convinced he was an elf who'd clawed his way out of that tiny, suffocating little life. Your friend burst out laughing, and that was all it took for him to get it. Turns out you two weren't just friends in name, you were exactly the same, deep down, craving the same things and thinking the same thoughts. The Black Dragon of the Dark Knights pressed his forehead to Rhys Klein's hand and pledged a bone-deep oath of faithful friendship to the hero. While they stood there, Vritra seized the moment and poured out his gratitude. Then, out of nowhere, something eerie struck the elf. The young man blurted, terrified, "What is it?" But his new friend dodged the question and only said it had to do with what he wanted. The dragon shot up into the sky, vowed to swing by Rhys after it flew the whole world, then vanished into the clouds. Jin felt like the moment he looked away, the guy vanished from sight in the blink of an eye, and the other guy nodded, saying the same thing. He kept thinking about that divine beast that had lived for 500 years, and now, at last, it wasn't just a legend anymore because it had become his first real, long-lived friend he had ever pulled into his life from the outside world. The girl shouted at Rhys, then tore toward them, bragging that she'd done it, she'd beaten that magical snake. He praised Minori, and you could tell she still had mana left, like her training was finally paying off in full, because she'd even pulled off perfect magic. Fritz stared in disbelief at how she took down that snake monster all by herself, and to him, there was no way she wasn't an A rank, nothing less. Klein snapped at the boy that now was not the moment to stare with his mouth hanging open. They finally learned the Demon King won't be back for 3 more years, then Minori, who didn't know a thing, froze in shock. The hero strode up to the guy and planted his hands on the man's shoulders, ready to spill something huge. He leaned in and told Jin about the massive power sleeping inside him, the courage factor that he'd need to take down the Demon King, and Jin just couldn't wrap his head around the fact that he might actually have it. The elf didn't even see him as a real human. She believed he could take down the ruler, even if that fight was going to be brutal. So Rhys decided that over the next year, he'd push Fritz to become even stronger than Minori. The girl kept grinding, hammering perfect fire magic through non-stop enchantment, while the hero watched, eyes locked on every blazing step. She flicked the sulfur flame sword into place, and right then, she lunged straight at Jin. She threw everything she had into it. This wasn't just any bout. It was her 182nd training fight already. 182 days back, training day 1 finally kicked off. They handed the boy a wooden sword to train with, even if it felt weird for him at first. Minori leaned in and told us Rhys personally forged this weapon for Jin custom gear made just for his training. The young man eagerly took the wooden sword, grateful to the bone. Right in front of the hero's eyes, the young man really had no mana at all, but he did have the perfect body to hold it, like a ready-made container, and the elf told Jin to imagine the vessel as a bucket and the mana as water. If you drain that bucket too hard, it'll run dry, but give it time and the mana snaps back on its own, while the vessel quietly swells a little too. Fritz remembered seeing it in a book on magical theory, and the hero's gut twisted because the student already knew too much, so he snapped his focus to the girl and grilled her about how she trained. She cringed with terror as she remembered being frozen unable to move a single finger for a whole week, and that nightmare scared her to the bone, so Jin was forced to suffer the same fate. So the guy blurted, "If you've got 0 mana, then where the heck am I supposed to get it from?" Klein decided to tip it straight into his vessel until it brimmed to the very top. A young hero decided to master the art of pouring mana into his wooden sword, so he shoved a magical device inside it, one that could gulp up mana as he trained. If Jin follows these simple steps, he'll boost his vessel and start mastering how to control mana all at once. Everyone was born with mana in their veins, but they still had to learn how to use it. Same way you learn to talk so their power wouldn't have to wait on some young guy to figure it out later. At that moment, the young man had 0 mana left in him, and that shocking emptiness might mean his body didn't need to replenish it at all. So they wouldn't sit around twiddling their thumbs, waiting for his vessel to heal itself like Minori had to, trapped while it slowly recovered. Reese warned Jin he'd struggle to move the mana at first, but once it finally clicked, he'd have to empty the mana vessel every single day, then the elf would refill it again, washing away his fatigue with magic and keeping that routine going for a full year. Klein was sure that with his technique, his vessel would balloon to 30 times its current size, and then once the courage inside finally kicked in, it would unlock his very own mana. Jin couldn't shake the feeling he might never pull it off. Reese leaned in and reminded him, "You already know I've even touched on the courage factor." That kid already knew only the one holding the factor could bring down the Demon King, and the hero could feel the pain of his low mana like it was written all over him. The elf's piercing gaze locked onto the boy and instantly spotted the massive potential buried inside him. Jean Fritz already grabbed the hero's hand, chasing strength, so the young man blurted, "Wait, did you change your mind?" All he did was clench his sword harder because the only thing he could truly do was fail to quit. With the Demon Lord's revival just 3 years away, the boys couldn't afford to sit around and wait, but Reese still insisted on placing his bet on this kid. Training kept roaring on, and Minori refused to hold back because that's exactly what her opponent had been waiting for. This marked their 182nd sparring bout for the day, and it had been the exact same number of days since training kicked off. The girl pressed forward, and the guy shut out the world, trying to melt into the sword, trusting the flow of mana like it was calling his name. She slammed into her opponent's weapon. Then, out of nowhere, the magic jammer snapped to life. Reese felt the defense spring to life and smile, but Minori, though she'd admit it was damn impressive, still insisted that guy had 0 chance. Believing she couldn't be beaten, she smashed Jin with a lightning-quick punch that blasted him straight back. The young man didn't budge, he stood ready to throw down again, and the elf got that, but she could only heal once per day because pushing beyond that would wreck the victim's body with pointless strain. Then he slammed the Goddess Compass quote into play and made it count. Reese started to walk away, but Jin yanked him back and demanded one thing. Could he really fire up that jammer using the hero's mana? Because if he could, then yeah, it meant he'd be able to cast magic too. The elf grinned as he confirmed it, and all of it finally landed because that boy had poured his heart into the work for the last 6 months so hard that tears instantly flooded his eyes, blurring everything. He rose from the dirt, clocked that it was time to build his endurance, and marched off to drill sword swings. Minori yanked the hero's cloak, forcing him to remember her, then shame hit hard as he tried to make it right. He ruffled her head and praised her grit because her lightning-fast recovery after she'd burned through her mana was downright jaw-dropping. The girl flashed a huge grin because there was no way that boy could beat her yet. The hero froze, stunned by how fast her attitude flipped, since just moments ago she'd looked utterly untouchable. But the hero couldn't help but get drawn to her sweet, gentle ways. Now that Jin finally learned how to wield mana, the real grind begins. He's got to master the awakening of his quote and his own magic. They say the way to unlock a hero's courage factor is to smash a huge obstacle alongside his comrades. Jin still wasn't a full-on hero, so the elf wouldn't let him go solo yet, but if Jin and Minori tagged along, he'd be way less likely to stumble into trouble. The girl shot her finger at the sky and yelled for Reese to look up. After ages without seeing one, a dragon Klein finally hadn't forgotten swooped in, flying straight toward them. The hero's jaw dropped. Vritra came back so fast, and there was no way the mana could have drained that quickly. The dragon finally soothed him, and he realized he hadn't even come close to burning through all the power it had just handed over. The beast couldn't resist showing off his brand new skill. That massive dragon shrank out of nowhere, like the world just rewound. Minori pressed his fingers to his cheeks, and a cautious warmth spread through him. Reese guessed the transformation could happen because Vritra's whole body was made of mana and the student practically lit up, certain she'd see nothing less than the hero's power at work. She shot out to fetch Jin and start brewing tea because they had a guest to host. The dragon snapped back that the demons were just unbearable, and the boy shot him a question: why did he come back so early? They told him they were gearing up to resurrect the Demon King, stuffing the air with deadly miasma, all thanks to magical beasts. So he chose to stick by his side for a while, and it absolutely stunned the dragon. That dragon chose to take on a demon just so he could finally crash and sleep easy, while the boy insisted, clearly, that he wasn't the one meant to take down the Demon King. He told them, "I bet on that kid with the courage spark he's running for his life, and a dragon is right on his tail. And even with every factor and every bit of magic on the table, that dragon is still going to overpower him." The dragon reeled at his wild ideas, but the white-haired one just smirked and said, "We'll see." The girl leaned in and asked Minori-san if he was getting too worked up, then slipped him a cup of tea laced with a potion. Minori-san finally confessed he couldn't stop himself. Doubt just kept clawing at him nonstop. She leaned in and asked, "Do you know the story about how the hero tore down the Demon King?" He shot back with pure excitement. "I know, and you could tell he'd idolized this hero since he was just a kid. She told me the hero's the only one who can take down the Demon King. She told him to stop spiraling and lock in on the person he wanted to become." The boy couldn't stop thinking about his dream, so he finally turned to Minori-san and asked why she busted her tail so hard. She said Risama promised he'd beat the Demon King, even if it took centuries. And if they fall short, he'll hunt down someone new brave enough to stand up, and that courage will be what finally tears down the Demon King. Minori-san is so sure that in the past and the future, people will still find reasons to love and treasure him. But she's quietly crushed. She refuses to gamble their future with anyone else, and she makes it clear she wants to stay. After that, he saw my memories clear as day, shot toward me to grab the side controls, and kept helping him until his last breath. So she figured, if I become the hero myself and take down the Demon King, everything has to turn out okay. With a grin, he leaned in and told me, "Minori-san is seriously awesome." The white-haired guy pointed it out. This was already the 365th day of training. She dubbed his technique Advanced Enchantment Magic, a blazing fire sword that cut the air like a warning. The girl smirked and told him it didn't matter how many times he snuffed out her flame, she'd just cast the enchantment again. The boy felt it in his bones. This wasn't enough, and he knew a magic suppression spell alone wouldn't stand a chance against Minori-san. The dragon clocked it. This mana-less boy had leveled up fast, carving through enemies with brutal sword skill and deadly magic, all in no time at all. The white-haired man shot back that you already told him how fast people grow, and then he slapped down a bet. He told Jinkang, "If my height shocks you, the dragon will owe me one wish." The dragon nodded in agreement and even warned him, "Bets swing both ways." The dragon snapped that he just didn't get people. Why would they cling to a single route when their lives burn out so fast? The white-haired man shot back that, for both of them, that dream wasn't just hope, it was an obsession. The dragon clocked it. He was basically way too human, and the white-haired one snapped at him. "Don't spout nonsense." He confessed he'd spent around 30 years as a human before his last life got wiped out, and compared to that, these two moments hit like pure magic. The girl clocked his dodges right away, and the guy grinned. This was their 365th throwdown, and he was already getting used to her moves. The dragon snapped into alarm, warning him to back off farther. Then the white-haired one shot back, calm and steady, promising him everything was totally fine. She leaned in and hissed that she was about to unleash her super magic. Right then, a dragon materialized nearby, grinning and saying it'd be a shame not to savor a battle that fierce. He unleashed a brutal technique, and a blinding surge of energy exploded around him. The girl and the white-haired boy went wide-eyed. He could barely get out a single mutter. She burst up to them, breathless and apologizing, admitting she'd gotten way too carried away and nearly fried Vritra. The white-haired boy grabbed Reitra's attention and snapped, "It's my fault I was warned not to fly that close, and I still did it." He froze, staring at his hand in disbelief because it wasn't the same jammer he'd used before. The dragon admitted the boy had caught him off guard, and then the look in his eyes said one thing. He was finally ready to wield magic now. The boy snapped back that this had never happened before, but the white-haired man simply nodded and swore the dragon was right, because this was exactly what he'd been craving all along. He said the boy had powered it with his own magic, no magical tool at all, and Jin-kun just froze in shock, struggling to believe it. He shot Nori a question about what she'd say, and she snapped back that she'd swung at him with everything she had. Yet he blocked her like it was nothing. She swore the spell felt unstoppable and overflowing with power. Then the guy pointed out, it all happened on the 365th day. People finally said Jinkun had crushed the training fight, feet planted hard, like the ground itself couldn't move him. The dragon chewed in delight, then grinned and ordered him to begin the next stage of training tomorrow. The white-haired one nodded hard, saying the man of his vessel had grown wildly strong and that they were finally ready to awaken the courage factor. He told them their real mission was to step into true battles and they'd have to hunt down teammates for the hero. No excuses. He told everyone Jin-kun would kick things off by hunting monsters with Minori. Then the kid blurted out a sudden apology and cut him off mid-sentence. He begged to go solo, kickstart his adventure career all over again, and totally blindsided everyone. She couldn't forget being asked what she wanted to be, and she swore this road would forge her into something stronger. The boy snapped that staying here meant he'd been leaning on them way too hard, and the white-haired man went grim. Jin-kun's old betrayal flashed back like a wound. He said he just wanted to be somewhere he could fight for the people he loved. Then the white-haired guy nodded, convinced that was the missing piece. He leaned in and told Jin-kun, "I'm taking Ritra with me." The boy blurted in shock, "Ritra-san." and the dragon froze too, stunned that it had to follow him. The dragon snapped at Reese for not warning him, then Reese shot back that he just made the call and reminded Ritra loud and clear that he'd lost the bet. He replayed the bet rules in his head, especially the part about Jinkun's height, and still couldn't believe how the kid's surprise had gotten to him. Reese urged him to grab this chance to study human life so he wouldn't get sealed up again. Ritra burst with excitement and swore he'd join the boy on his journey, and the girl lit up like that was the best news ever. The girl asked if they'd be okay, and he shot back that Vritra was the strongest bodyguard and that Jinkun needed comrades by his side. People claimed Vritra was a fire dragon, and when he promised to train the boy along the road, the kid suddenly believed he'd turn into one of the hero's pillars. He tore himself away from Risama, then told her that he and Vritra were about to kick off their journey. Then he leaned in and told me to take care of myself because he expected a whole lot from him. She clocked that Risama looked lonely, because Jinkun had already sprinted off to chase his dream of becoming a hero. Reese confessed he felt lonely, but what hit him hardest was the shock of how bright he looked, and she just smiled back, saying he was a seriously hard-working kid. The girl slammed her fist down and swore she'd stay right beside Risama, no matter what. He told himself he wasn't going to talk Minori out of it, then she confessed she'd been terrified the whole time, because she knew that one day, they'd have to say goodbye. He told everyone he was just ignoring the glaring truth staring him right in the face. He finally got it. Minori and Jinkun were actually living every second, while he'd been hiding behind his long life, wasting time like it was all he was meant to do. He was convinced it was identical to his past life. Then he leaned in and kissed her. He blurted out that he was in love with Minori and swore he wanted to build a life with her. After what felt like forever, he finally shouted to her and she spun around, wide-eyed, demanding to know what on earth was wrong. He leaned in and asked if she had a minute because he had to tell her something important. And she fired back with, "Okay, what's it about?" He said he needed to figure out their next move, and the girl nodded because they couldn't just stay put while the other one happily soaked up this carefree life. He told them he was heading straight for the demon territories to take on the dolls. The girl blurted, shocked Dulles. He leaned in and said he'd spotted it straight from Ritra's memories. He pointed at the forest like it was their whole new home, and if he was right, the Demon King was curled up in its deepest shadows. He confirmed a demonic race called it home, and she blurted in shock, "So that means there are demons lurking in this forest?" She said his words sounded impossible, and he told her he didn't blame her, because even now, they still couldn't detect their presence. He said it was suppression magic, the same stuff hiding behind the elven barrier, so the girl nodded and agreed it could work. The young man finally blurted out the truth. He knew nothing about demons at all, not how many there were, and not a thing about how they lived. He admitted he didn't even know what the Demon King was after, and if they wanted Jinkun's generation to beat him, they'd have to study demons harder than ever and learn every last thing. He shot Minori a question: would she come with him? Minori startled, then snapped into motion. She lit up and agreed on the spot, and he told her this within 3 years. The hero and Jinkun would be charging straight onto the front lines. And to stay with Minori forever, he has no choice. He has to uncover the things he still doesn't know. He said they were here, but when she looked, nothing showed up, and surprise hit her like a punch. Right out of nowhere, half the magical beast's body erupted into view, and he roared, "Hellgate." Then it hit him. This was the entrance, no doubt about it. She snapped her head around, stunned. When did everything around her completely change? He figured they'd set up a one-way barrier. Sure, you could walk out, but try to step in and you'd hit a brick wall. He felt a heavy miasma hang in the air and knew this was demon territory starting right now, so he snapped, "Move out." They stumbled on yet another wrecked village, and he realized, flat out, they'd been in the Dalles for a whole month, yet not a single demon had shown up. He figured the village had been hit, and the leftover magic trails made him snap everyone needed to stay sharp and careful. She warned that the number of monsters they face keeps climbing, and each one's getting stronger by the second. He checked on Minori, telling her he'd fired off purification magic so the miasma's sting would vanish like it never existed. She said it felt like the village had been wiped out just moments ago. She leaned in and asked if that was battle in the background. Resume nodded, confirming her hunch. A furious stranger was yelling at the animals, screaming for them to scatter and get out right now. She screamed in pure horror that demonic beasts had attacked people, and since it happened in Dalles, she practically figured that was the whole nightmare, right there. People shrieked in terror as they stared, whispering, "Are you demons?" The old woman stared in shock because somehow they had no horns at all. He figured giving into the moment had helped them, but then the truth hit. Those weren't people, they were demons, and he had to act. He leaked lunge to stop Minori, then the old woman's eyes sharpened as she spotted the truth. The one in front of her was both human and an elf. He demanded to know how they'd wound up here and why they weren't falling apart under that miasma, and the village elder thanked them for their help. As the sky dimmed, the head woman swept in and begged them to stay the night with her. To everyone's surprise, Resume grinned and told them, right there, they wouldn't say no. An old woman stopped them cold and demanded they follow her. She pressed Risama, asking why this stranger could get so close to him so easily, and he said the house's vibe instantly made him think of Japan. She snapped her thoughts into place, wondering why this demon was so damn easy to reach. He leaned in and told Minori that their move was simple: gather intel. First, because since they weren't showing a single bit of hostility, he told them to hang back for now and watch how it all played out. The old woman blurted out an apology for making them wait, then pressed food into their hands only to admit she wasn't even sure they'd like the local flavors. She stared at the food and swore it looked totally normal until she remembered she'd been watching the whole cooking and somehow hadn't noticed she'd slipped poison into it. She said it was absolutely delicious, so soft, so delicate, and shockingly close to the flavor Sulfason used to whip up for them. The old woman said it felt like her son had come back, then he realized the food was hitting her with the exact same emotion. He told her that, on their travels, they'd stumbled through plenty of shattered villages, then leaned in and asked straight if her son had turned into one of those monsters. The old woman shook her head and said her son had left the old folks to fend for themselves. She told Honori that he'd finally decided to ditch the village, and Honori snapped, "You're kidding, why?" Then the old woman leaned in and said it straight: every last local young person had already fled. She said that 3 years ago they vowed to lend their power to the Demon King, and then everyone vanished. From that moment on, Minori watched it happen. She knew they couldn't stop themselves from unleashing the attacks, and it hit her hard. Demonic beasts don't just hunt humans, they hunt demons too. The old woman sat by the hearth, staring into the flames, stunned because this was nothing like what she ever expected to see. Minori jumped in to help with the dishes, but her face burned bright when the old woman thanked her. He remembered the time he spent with that woman who felt like his mother, and for him, it was some of the happiest moments of his whole life. The old woman leaned in and told Minori, if she really enjoyed every minute with him, then that's a good sign, and maybe it means you're right. She was absolutely certain no doubt could survive. With a bright smile, the girl introduced herself. My name is Minori. He'd been sure the books were right that demons were supposed to be enemies, but the village elders didn't give him even a hint of hostility. Not like the younger crowd who'd vanished 3 years back. He figured that if the Demon King ever got reborn, Kuwata-san's son would start butchering humans and then he'd have to step in, at least a little. A few days later, he told them, this is what we snagged today, right after they smashed the demonic beast. The townfolks and the mayor thanked them, and he shot back, same to you guys, after all, you've had to live with us this whole time. He leaned in and asked, are you really not scared to let creatures from a totally different race into your home, especially ones that are supposed to be hostile? She shot back, even if that's true, don't you think the two of them are still practically inseparable, race difference or not? She warned him, don't ever underestimate that old woman's intuition. Minori snapped back that she could be a demon too, but the old woman shot back that the two of them had grown dear to her, and they both admitted the same was true. They were sure Grandma Quota had finally become one of them too. He grinned and told her she was just as precious to them, even calling her grandmother right there. The old woman smiled and told them they were such sweet little guys and begged them to stay and live right in her village. He thanked his grandmother with a full heart, then snapped that they had to hit the road because he was hungry to learn more about the world. With a grin, he leaned in and said he wanted to know everything about them, even the demons. Then he snapped his focus into place and started announcing his super barrier magic with full force. He finished the spell and slammed a name on it, War Goddess's gaze of contempt. He told them this was ancient barrier magic. Once he stayed alive, not a single beast could come near him. The old woman froze in shock. Then the headman thanked him. Because finally they could wait for the children. He added that the young ones had already left after hearing the news about the revival, and she confirmed it. She remembered that in that exact moment, their horns flared bright red like a warning light. An old woman told Minori that demons twist miasma into magical power, so that's how they survive in the demonic realm. And Minori's jaw dropped when she saw the horn's color shift. The more the miasma thickened, the more magical power they could squeeze out of it, and Minori couldn't believe demon horns had it in them. That's why he felt so sure they'd make it, because they could pull off external magic, drawing power straight from the miasma, in the Dallas, thick and everywhere. The old woman swore she'd felt those miasmas too back in her youth, but her son's case was totally different. His horns flared a weird red, and his whole body started changing. The villagers snapped when they saw their kids buying into revival rumors. No questions asked, not even a second to verify the truth. He figured that in that moment, they weren't any different from humans at all. Maybe the Demon King was just some fairy tale story to them, which explained why they'd welcomed him with such warmth. He pressed Minori for answers, and she snapped that the Demon King's revival wasn't some bedtime fairy tale. Then she hit him with the scary question, what if it was real? Yeah, she couldn't stop worrying. What if the Demon King really was about to be revived any day now? The old woman just hammered one thing into them: get back safe and sound, nothing else mattered. He'd always told himself his one true mission was to beat the Demon King, but if he actually won, then Granny's son would be next. The villagers thrust him a gift and joked it was a little shabby, but they couldn't shake the worry that it might not be enough to truly say thank you. He squinted at the book and swore it was ancient, penned in the demon tongue and in all of human territory, only a handful like it ever existed. He could barely wait to see which spells were hiding there, but Minori snapped him back to earth, telling him to calm down because they hadn't even said goodbye yet. He begged Minori for a quick look inside, and she cut him off with a stern no, because she could tell how badly he was craving to see what was inside. She swore she'd never hand it over to him because once he got his hands on it, he'd lock himself in and reread it with laser focus all day. But he blurted out, "Why are you handing us something this valuable?" And the old woman just smiled, saying she'd be happy if that grimoire actually helped them. She said they never believed he was lying. They just clung to the hope their kids would come back. And until that day, they'd give everything they had. He grinned and promised them they'd all come back safe and sound. At least that's what he believed. That old woman grinned and told him, right to his face, that he was hands down the kindest elf around. So they tore away from Grandmother Quota's village and pushed even deeper into the Dalles. A month before they left Gwotu village, a guild member pulled him aside and flat out told him she wouldn't let him join the quest because he was flying solo. In the tavern, they were buzzing about him, swearing he couldn't possibly still be alive because they insisted he died, trapped there with no magic to help him escape. The dragon bristled at being stuck on his own, so what was he even supposed to do? The employee shot back that the rules demanded 2 E-rank adventurers in the party. With a heavy sigh, she admitted that pets don't count as members of the group. He begged Vritra-san to shrug it off and then snapped that you couldn't possibly miss the truth. Without her, the task would never get done. The dragon let out a laugh and it totally backfired, because the boy then said he'd tried to tag along with other groups, but they all rejected him. He figured the whole damn town already knew about his broken magic. The dragon snapped, "Don't let it get to you. There's a whole group out there that won't care about your flaws." He told himself, "I can do this," because when he walked away from his mentor, he did it with steel in his heart and a vow to get stronger. He snapped into focus and refused to quit just because of something like that. Another guy slid into the seat beside him and asked straight up if it was true he couldn't use magic. The dragon's eyes narrowed fast, and he instantly decided he didn't like this guy. But then the guy told him, "I'm alone too, at least for now," and when he urged them to hook up with the group, it completely caught him off guard. He said those horned rabbits could be handled without magic, and honestly, he didn't mind taking the pet with him. Raiden shot his hand out and introduced himself, and the kid quickly answered, "My name's Jean Fritz." Raiden declared it was over, then warned Jin he couldn't bet his life on the rest because the supposed best Earth Mage still couldn't be trusted. He figured he signed up just to lend a hand, but then he couldn't stop wondering if he'd actually picked the right partner and started something truly amazing. In the tavern, everyone was buzzing about the Crossins right after a year ago when they were promising things. Then the whole squad crashed after whispers that they'd murdered one of their own comrade. One of them swore he'd heard their comrade was still breathing, and the next guy chimed in that he'd shown up in the guild solo, then hooked up with another dude right after. He closed in on them and demanded, "Is it really true?" He howled as magical interference and suppression ripped through the air. Raiden blurted that Jin had pulled it off, and Jin shot back, "It all worked because of my bait." He swore 2 weeks had already passed since he got teamed up with Jin, and even with no mana in his body, he could still feel it everywhere, while his swordplay stayed razor clean with not a single wasted motion. And he couldn't help but wonder what kind of monstrous ocean of mana was trapped inside this sword. Rain admitted he was scared of Jin, and that confession hit Jin like a shockwave. A guild member came in, stamped the mission as done, and then bam, they were officially shoved into the D-rank group with Dreamy Travelers. She declared, loud and proud, that their crew had finally been bumped up right into C rank. Raiden said it looked like everyone else had already started calling them, and that promise was hanging in the air. But even after all that, he made it clear they're still stuck fighting the same problems. Jan swallowed his pride and apologized for ignoring the rules for C-rank quests while Vritra's rage boiled, because the guild still hadn't taken him in. Vritra snapped that if he could just get back to his real form, everything would click into place fast, and Jin instantly decided Raiden was the real deal, a genuinely good guy. A voice cut through the chaos Luke, and when they spat good for nothing, Jin's eyes snapped to him, recognizing him instantly. They couldn't believe it, Jin was actually alive. Raiden asked Jin if they'd met before, and then Luke erupted in fury, screaming at him, "Don't mess with me!" Raiden, totally baffled, said they were only B ranks. Then, Luke snatched Jin by the sleeve and demanded where he found the nerve to show up here. The girl told Luke to stop, But he erupted Jin's fault, he said, because they'd all been smashed down to D rank, so Raiden cut in and told him to forget it if he didn't even get it. Luke kept screaming, freaking out that he was still alive, and he blamed Jin, saying it was all Jin's fault he couldn't use magic. He demanded Jin speak up, and Jin shot back. The truth is, someone out there saved me. Luke scoffed and called it nonsense, then shot back with a sharp, sarcastic question: was he seriously lucky enough to run into an A-rank adventurer while two monsters were right on his tail? Jin glanced back and swore his savior wasn't an A rank or even an S rank because the power he wielded couldn't be judged by any human standard. He leaned in, eyes blazing, and swore he didn't just get saved, he got forged into a fighter, the final hope meant to wipe out the Demon King. Luke called it stupid, Jin snapped. That's why I came back. And Luke's doubts hit hard. He was the last hope. Luke stepped up to the crowd and blasted Jin as a longtime liar, then demanded how anyone could ever trust a guy who couldn't use magic, yet still pulled something like that. He figured Jin must have cooked up this whole master on his own, but Jin snapped back, and no, I really exist. Luke first demanded proof, and when Raiden heard him, he admitted the whole tale sounded wild but swore Jin wasn't lying. Out of nowhere, a hooded stranger showed up and demanded they stop right there. She asked if the guy who saved him was named Reese, then said she knew him too and insisted Jin wasn't lying. The whole crowd gasped when they finally clocked her Rehav Loli, the legendary elf, and everyone realized she was the real-life legend from those books. Luke's jaw dropped in total disbelief. If Rahab-sama said it, then Jin had to be telling the truth, and right then, she snapped that it was time for them to go. The hat-wearing guy slammed his fist to the floor and screamed that she was lying too. The girl demanded Luke stop, then he slumped onto the floor, completely crushed. The guildmaster shut it down and said, "That's enough," then told Luke's team to hand it to them, and Luke was totally floored. The men in hats snapped that they were done, then they pointed straight at the crossers and mentioned one member who'd vanished a year ago. Luke blinked, totally thrown, and asked if they were really pushing for a full reinvestigation. Raiden shot Jin a worried look and asked if he was alright. Jin gave him a grateful nod, then spun his attention straight toward Rahab-sama. Raiden shot Rahab-sama an invite to grab a bite, and she snapped back that all she'd heard was a familiar name, so she stormed in to meddle in a mess that wasn't even hers. Right in front of her companion, Rahab shocked them by admitting she might just accept their offer. Suddenly, bam, a brutal crash shakes the scene, and Rahab blurts, "We're totally fine," while realizing she forgot to introduce herself. She popped in and said, "I'm Rehav Lali, a middle-aged elf." Then she turned to her companion and called her Anastasia. Anastasia snapped that Vritra was just flexing, like all he could manage was lighting a cigarette. Then Vritra shot back that it only happened because his version was the smaller one. Raiden shot him a grin and teased, "Back then, you had so much fire in you, you could have burned down a whole city." And Vritra erupted into a blood-curdling scream of pure rage. Vritra snapped that he was a charlatan and swore Reese had fooled him. Then Jin shot back that Master Reese couldn't possibly be that wrong, but Anastasia looked at it all and believed the dragon wasn't lying. Rahav swore she felt his magical circuits ripple with something off like a glitch hiding in the dark, and she blamed it on whoever handled him, wasting mana with zero care. She leaned in and asked if Jin-kun was Risa's student, then he beamed and told her, yes, happily. She told Master Reese she'd always have endless respect for him because now she had no choice but to watch him even closer than ever. As they headed out, Vritra grabbed Rahav and demanded to know what she really had going on with Reese. The dragon fired the question at him again, and she warned, "If you keep your mouth shut, I'll rip in and fix the magical circuits inside your body." With a bright smile, she said the master still had to step in and fix every mistake the students made. The dragon blared out in pure joy that his mouth was finally shut. Rahab's mind immediately started racing with something. 1 year later in Ruado village, that voiceover leaned in and wondered, had the Demon King's victims ever passed through here? When the girl spoke in that familiar dialect, Risama's worst fears slammed into place. 6 months after he ditched Quota's village, he and Minori trudged into the Daos to hunt answers, but every settlement was wiped out, and not a single demon showed up. But they finally stumbled on a couple of grimoires written in that demonic tongue. After Granny handed him the grimoire, he couldn't wait to dive back into his research, because it wasn't just magic, it was an archive, and the way grimoires in the Daos differed from the human world totally blew his mind. He started to wonder if demons, living their whole lives with magic so close to corruption, were basically born closer to the darkness, so that's why his darkness attribute was blowing up so fast. She demanded he wrap it up in 3 days, so he swore, without a doubt, he'd finish it on time. She said it took him a whole week to reach the last village, and he shot back that he got so lost in it that he didn't sleep or eat until Minori snapped and scolded him. He swore it had been hundreds of years since he got reborn as an elf, and now time felt warped way past anything a human could understand yet. Minori still put up with it all, and he was endlessly grateful. 3 days later, he let out a heavy sigh. Nothing had changed, and the Demon King and those heroes still stayed just as stuck as ever. He was convinced he had to take down the Demon King because he couldn't break his promise to Grimlet, San, yet as long as everyone stayed alive, he'd be happy. He figured millennia had rolled by since magic first appeared, yet nobody had ever cracked the code for magic that could beat time and death. So then, what about the Demon King? He's been knocked down countless times, yet he still storms right back. He couldn't shake the feeling this was something far bigger than this world power from beyond the stars. The book claimed the Demon King had been slain again and again each time he came back in this world, and they call it reincarnation. He demanded what was coming, and Minori snapped that they weren't alone demons, and at least 100 of them were bearing down on them. He added that with them was someone whose power matched the Demon King, no exaggeration. The crowd kept asking if they'd finally snap someone up for a sacrifice, and the man shot back that, just like the other villages, monsters had swept this place clean plunder, taken, gone while the beast let out this sharp, questioning sound. The girl clocked them the moment they got spotted, and the boy burst out that it was just a tiny 2-footed dragon cousin. A real battle drake, so everything would be fine, but as she heard him, her thoughts flipped straight to one thing riding it. Staring straight into the dragon's eyes, the boy threw down his claim this beast would never have the nerve to fight someone stronger than it. The girl shot back that she trusted them with her whole heart and expected nothing short of greatness, then added, "Yeah, he's small, but his rider. That strength is unreal." The horned man slammed the verdict, no survivors left, and sneered that they were just weaklings. Then went on to say they must have run into some other demon, just not the Golgarsum. As they inched toward the final stage, the world suddenly went quiet. Fewer and fewer people showed up on their radar, while one person, fingers running over their own mental checklist, focused on figuring out the score. The guy in the chair clocked the name Golokar Zollinger, a demon of dark magic, title raised as captain of the Southern Demon King's search party, riding into town on a dragon steed named Wang Chang. With a burst of joy, the boy realized the magic actually worked. Then he spun toward Reisama and blurted that the creatures had red horns, insisting he'd never ever seen anything like them. The horn-clad man forced himself to admit it wasn't all doom and gloom, but he couldn't figure out where the demon sphere was sucking in that mana. From then, he said he came here to dodge detection, and the young guy shot back that they were helpless, with nothing they could do. The horned man barked that they had urgent mission scrape up as much mana as they could, because it was all for the Demon King's rebirth, and he insulted them while he drove the point home. The crowd roared that they'd gladly lay down their lives for their king, and if their orders meant dying alongside their grandparents, they'd go together as one family. The scared boy spun toward the girl, stammering that the whole place had erupted into blood-curdling screams. Then the horn-blaring man, grinning like he owned the night, said it was one powerful spirit and that the Demon King would absolutely love it. Right? The boy blurted. So why are we even hearing all this? And what? The boy stared at the horned man, roaring like he'd gone mad, clutching his chest. What was that desperate cry even coming from? Then he saw the truth fire, spilled from those horns. The boy's gaze went blank and white, and endless tears streamed out as if his eyes were breaking. The boy finally clocked it. This was mind-infecting magic, and the girl shot back, asking if she even had the power to pull something like that off. Then he went on, saying that if he jams the orb with mind-destroying magic, he'll take over every demon and turn them into loyal soldiers. She spun toward the guy, worry spilling out as she demanded to know if that meant all of them. Yes, the little boy and their grandmother too were finally kicked out as residents, and he shook his head, saying their minds were still somehow holding on. Miraculously, he said with full confidence that those streaming tears proved no question that everything unfolding was exactly as it seemed. Someone leaned toward Golgar and said, "If you take this route, you'll reach Kyoto in no time." The boy's mind snapped straight to the village of Kyoto, and the horned guy first blinked in startled confusion, then grinned and nodded, saying it was absolutely wonderful. The man barked for them to move, and someone immediately snapped back with heartfelt gratitude, while in the shadows one person quietly swore that if this step could help their Demon King, then Grandma and the whole family would finally find real joy in serving him. He softly slid his hand into hers, calling her name, and the moment she heard it, she spun back smiling like everything was totally fine. He gave a hard nod, spun to Minora, and swore he fully understood now was a perfect moment to hit those soldiers in an ambush. The horned man snapped to attention, caught a faint sound, and shouted that survivors were right there. Then he demanded, stunned, how anyone could have missed them, and ordered an immediate pursuit. The white-eyed boy with 2 horns answered, "Got it, no doubts. I understand perfectly." The man with the horn started to explain why he didn't love it for this exact reason, but he never got to finish because a massive bone-rattling explosion tore through the village, blasting right among the houses. The man snapped his head to the boy and demanded, "What is it?" The boy shot back that it was some freaky demon and they'd just gotten ambushed. Without hesitation, the man barked, "Just beat them." The boy opened his mouth to protest, but Gulir cut him off, thrusting the orb the Demon King had handed him like a weapon because even a lesser demon would fold fast. "This is mind-infecting magic," he said, and the danger hit like a punch. The horned man boomed that he held the ball in his grasp and that anyone would only ever dream of subjects like them. Then he snarled, ordered the killing, told them to stop at nothing, and demanded every last drop of their mana. As the crowd erupted into screaming, the man snapped back under his breath, calling them pathetic and useless. Then he grumbled that all he was really here to do was collect mana. And why, in the world, had they dumped him alone in this brutal wilderness? The guy burst in, sprinting straight at Gulger mid-flight, and screamed at the top of his lungs for them to beat him right now and strip away every last bit of magic that was his. Rushing through the air, the boy steadied his trusty sword with 2 fingers and then blasted spell after spell, an anti-darkness incantation, a lightning enchantment, and a dazzling burst of blinding brilliance. Gulger leaned in, asking who had just shown up, and the boy shot back with a sarcastic grin like, "Yeah, everything's clear now," because no matter how hard he tried to stash his magic till the very last second, his presence still dragged eyes straight to him. The man admitted this was his first real fight with a demon, and for an elf with 900 years under his belt, that was totally new to him. Then the boy blinked in shock, asked what he meant, and the next instant, the man ripped his sword free and aimed it straight at the boy. She finally understood this curse was real, and it threw her into a darkness that stretched on forever dazed. She clawed for answers, trying to figure out who in their right mind could unleash something this horrifying with just one spell. The horned man grinned, clocked the villager shaking in pure terror after the power he'd just shown, and tried to strike a deal, then froze himself, because the boy's bright, happy face hit him like a warning and made him instantly wary. The boy sat there, replaying how he'd finally nailed the job and how, after all those long years, every little nothing surprise he'd brushed off had turned into wisdom that helped him piece everything together, until it all made one clear picture with everyone else. The boy swallowed hard, convinced this was the real outside world they'd been hyping. Then he blurted to the man that he was just an elf, a nobody among his people, kicked out of his own group, yet desperate to carve out at least one real legend. Before he vanished forever, the man stared right back at him. Reesklein's face lit up as he blurted his name and promised it'd be great to get to know Gulger someday, while Gulger just scowled, like he was 1 second away from snapping back. Rage exploding in him, he leapt onto his dragon and bellowed at the sky, furious that this elf had just dropped out of nowhere. He paused for a beat, then realized with a jolt that neither he nor his sword was giving off a single shred of energy. Barely a heartbeat later, the man slammed into action, swinging that massive sword at the boy with savage fury, and just like that, the kid's brittle blade snapped in an instant. The punch landed, and the boy crumpled to the floor, stunned at how numb he'd felt right before impact. Even with magic this top tier, he couldn't stop thinking, could someone reach that strength without ever speaking a word? Then the man spit his verdict. The boy couldn't possibly defend against power like that, and he proclaimed that the weaker races should be wiped out. Right before the boy was about to leave for the next world, the man snapped that he had just one question for him. Was he truly one of the heroes? And that terrified kid panicked, racing through what heroes even were. She sprinted down the street. Then a voice snapped, calling her by name and demanding Minora lure out every lesser demon. She bolted straight to the boy and said she got it. He grinned and told her this was her chance too. He'd finally faced the leader, then she pushed, asking if he really wanted to take him on one-on-one. With a burst of nerves and courage, the young man blurted that there was one more thing they had to talk about, and the girl leaned in, asking what he really meant. He stared her down and declared, dead serious, that she was the key to unlock their road to absolute victory. Right in front of the girl, the guy suddenly sank to one knee, shock on both their faces, and with hope burning in his voice, he declared that it was her who had to carry the most important mission to break the evil spell and free every last demon. And when she finally gathered herself, determination blazed back at him. Standing tall on solid ground, the girl flashed a confident grin, promised she'd handle it, and told Risama to good luck. Then she tore toward the horned crowd. The moment they spotted her, they erupted in shouts that it was her, and right after that, she unleashed blazing top-tier fire magic. The girl ripped out a piercing scream, and just like that, her hair shot upward as if an invisible hand yanked it. While a brutal wave of magic and fire erupted from her palms, the phalanx, stunned into silence, stared in sheer awe at this never-before-seen spectacle. With every ounce of strength, the boy lunged ahead. Then a deadly spear whipped up a breath from his face. He slammed on the brakes, and one thought hit him instantly. This was exactly the thrust he'd been waiting for. The boy berated himself in his head for missing the enemy's approach until impact hit, and even though she wasn't some ordinary fighter, she unleashed her magic with 0 words. Then the horned man seized the moment and demanded the boy tell him right now, before his last breath, who had sent him here. The man studies the boy with a sharp stare and asks if he's really one of the heroes, and the boy blurts out, utterly confused. Heroes? What do you mean? With the kind of shock you can hear? So the man smirks and leans in, saying they're lucky. All right. And the Demon King is going to be thrilled. Golgar kept smirking that if these heroes were truly such pathetic reps of the lower races, they'd seize the whole world with 0 trouble. Then, he snapped a furious glare at the boy and promised he'd grind him into dust. He shot his hand forward, and a wild sphere of magic erupted from his palm. Then he yanked the boy up into the sky with it, and the kid instantly realized, again, that this was wordless magic. Likely some brutal advanced water spell, because the gap in power and skill between them felt absolutely massive. With his last scrap of strength, the boy started chanting the ancient windroar spell, poured every shred of will into the words, sparked his magic, and prayed like hell that this time a miracle would hit, and that none of it would be for nothing. Suddenly, a spear shot out, and the boy's panic exploded. He was staring at a blade that looked like earth forged inside the flames, and he couldn't wrap his head around how that was even possible before. There was only earth magic, and now he had no idea how to stand against it, or what kind of attack would slam into him the next moment. The kid sprinted away in panic as the man cackled behind him, telling him he had no choice but to run, and insisting the Demon King and Vahaya-sama had blown the threat way out of proportion just to scare off those so-called heroes. As he sprinted, panic lit up his mind. This cursed forest was filthy beyond belief. His horn made his mana practically limitless, and worst of all, that guy cast magic without a single word. Memories hit him hard back in the same village. He'd met Rahab, and she had a whole stash of magical tools, using spell work like it was effortless, no words at all. Yet, this time, the enemy's got nothing like that. So right here and now, he's clearly stronger than her. Desperation shoved him forward. He sprinted to outrun Golgar's pursuit, not even daring to guess what waited up ahead. Yet every step was dragged down by dark fears about the traps Golgar was setting, so he kept whipping his head back over his shoulder. The man snapped irritably at his dragon, bellowed at the boy to stop running, spit out a nasty name, then yanked the rainward rein, sending his dragon surging forward at twice the speed straight at the kid. Meanwhile, the guy slammed to a halt, and the dragon hot on his tail had no choice but to stop dead right with him. The man snapped his head toward the dragon, glaring like, "What the hell is going on? Why'd you suddenly stop chasing me?" Meanwhile, the boy was already spiraling in his head, thinking, yeah, it had stopped because of him. The man snapped to attention after hearing it, then spit in disgust, swearing it could only be a vile elf. The boy skidded to a stop, crushed himself against a tree, and muttered that this distance should have been enough until the enemy was still staring back in his view, so he had to vanish his presence before they spotted him. Planting his feet against a tree, the boy snapped his arms through a perfect, unbroken routine, eyes blazing as he started chanting a brutal, supreme appraisal spell meant to lay bare every detail of his target demon, Gogol Zulinger. He pointed to him holding a massive two-handed blade forged from the bones of the evil dragon Gram Reyes, packed with explosive enchantments, dark and earth magic, a crystal sealing spell, and even mind infection magic on the right arm, while the left arm burned with fire magic and soaked everything with water magic. And then it hit him, those spells weren't aimed at anyone else. They were crawling all over his own body. The boy finally clocked what was happening. The whole thing hinged on summoning magic, and the trick was clear: steer the mana using the right words to shape the spell, then pour mana into that formula, and boom, the magic fires off. The boy figured he could pull off magic without a single word because the exact formulas he needed were inked right on his body, letting him skip the whole step where most people normally write out those magical scripts. The boy stared at it. Golgar's demon mana compatibility was sky high, but it still wasn't enough to power every curse formula tattooed on his body and twist his mana flows that fast, because all those calculations were grinding the caster's body to exhaustion. The boy stared at the ceiling, thinking, high-level magic always eats a ton of mana, so how is my opponent summoning it non-stop? Then he licked his lips and grinned. He loved the thrill of not knowing what would happen next. With that mysterious smirk burning on his face, the guy threw his arms wide, declared without blinking that his ultimate prize was this whole cursed forest, then demanded they show him every stream of filth in it right now. The boy didn't just say it, he declared his goal with absolute certainty. He was going to see everything. Even the tiniest, nearly invisible threads of mana sliding through the air around him like an unseen river, so he snapped into action with appraisal magic, mana, searching magic, and get a Croxy. He stared at his own hand and finally snapped because it was staring him in the face the whole time. Golger then fused his entire body into one massive, magical instrument, cutting off the flow of his own mana completely. And when he realized this shattered the body's very essence, he never even thought to try it. The guy decided to whip up a magic formula right then and fasten it to the pad of his finger like it was part of him. The boy realized that if he stopped the mana's flow and pulled it straight into his own hand, then when he finally shot his finger out, something would suddenly burst from his grip, panic hit, and he blurted out a startled exclamation. He froze mid-thought. He'd totally forgotten to rein in his mana, and just as he tried to do it again, he heard that unmistakable sound of a man sprinting straight toward him. Panic hit the boy out of nowhere. What if that rival slipped back to the village? As the man closed in, he smirked and said it looked like hide and seek, but then he crushed the mood. No time for childish games. The man blurted that if he could snatch his girlfriend, he'd come running straight to him, so the other guy caught the plan fast, snapped out of it, and sprinted to Minora as hard and fast as he could. Lost in thought again, the boy finally realized that forging every single new formula for higher magic would demand a brutal amount of effort. Then his mind snapped to a tougher question. What about strike magic on top of that? The guy bragged that impact magic was top tier, then lifted a finger right beside it. A round, patterned swirl of magic burst into view. This magic spits out a flying projectile, and he made it on a total whim. It's not some world-ending blast, but the sheer simplicity is the point. He thought he'd nailed it, cutting his mana down for the first time, and in his 108 years, nothing had ever felt like this. He shut his eyes, sank into his own senses, and felt an unreal warmth wrap around him, soft, comforting, all the way through, so he decided to try again. The boy shot his fingers forward, and boom! A glowing ball of magic burst right out of them, and he couldn't help blurting out a sharp, startled gasp. The boy let out a tiny squeak with a nervous, happy grin, like he never imagined it would happen. Meanwhile, the man stared at the magic and wondered why it showed up at all, and why he couldn't keep tabs on his own magical vessels. The boy figured he'd set it up for just a little less power than it was hitting. Rage tore through the man's chest as he bellowed, demanding to know how that sneaky elf had hidden his presence, and the boy snapped back that at least the enemy would surely be back. He leaned in and said he could finally put all his fresh discoveries to work right away, especially the big promise of using fire magic. The man on the dragon roared at Traitor, grinning like he already knew this plan would never work. The kid dropped straight to the ground in front of the horned man, and the moment the guy saw him, rage flared. He barked that the boy finally got around to showing his face. The boy shot his hand out, chanting the ultimate physical enchantment, TIR as KOD, while the man grinned and said in no uncertain terms that sure, he had the power, but it wouldn't do him a thing. They kept trading magic blows, and then the boy snapped his spell had been flipped back on him. Right then, the man went stone-faced and declared him lost, spitting that he was a damn elf, and that sudden warning hit even the man himself. Right then, the boy shot his fist forward and slammed the spell, strike magic unleashing a surge of power that blasted straight at the helpless man. The horn-wearing guy, stunned, snarled that even this boy could sling spells without a word. Then the kid grinned and said he'd just mastered it all, thanks to the man. The man crumpled to the ground from the boy's brutal magic blast, and as the dust settled, he immediately wondered if he could seal that horn, the boy's main mana source. Would the magic finally die out? He couldn't stop himself from questioning it. The guy grinned and said, "This isn't it," then snapped his hand forward. Black magic coils writhed out like snakes while he shouted, "Dark magic cat, sticky whip," and left himself stunned, wondering what he'd do next. The man yanked himself upright, wrapped tight in a magical whip, and the instant he snapped back to his senses, pure shock ripped through him as he blurted, "What the hell is going on?" The boy shot back, asking if the man had finally come to his senses, and the guy snapped that he was just awful, then shut his eyes and started unleashing his magic through his horn. He snarled with pure fury, slamming his rage into the universe as he couldn't use magic, then cursed the boy as a vile elf who'd pulled dirty tricks only for the kid to stay calm and answer, "I don't know." Rage boiled in his veins as he barked that he didn't care at all, his perfectly loyal soldiers would be here soon. And sure, they might look like dogs, but with the magic crystal's power unclaimed, that boy had zero chance of winning. The man stared his subordinates down and told the boys, "This is it. Show me your loyalty without question." With a triumphant grin, the boy shot back that all his mind-bending magic, the one he was so proud of, had already been wiped out completely by them. The man's brows furrowed as he blurted a quick, confused question, then the boy stepped forward, faced Minora, and declared that she was the decisive key that would seal their victory. The girl looked totally lost and asked what she should do, and before she could even think, the boy said, "Just lend me the ball for a second," so she handed it over right away. The boy shut his eyes tight, gritted his focus, and chanted the ancient words over the blade, anti-darkness, enchantment, and boom. The sword erupted with jaw-dropping power. The girl froze, terror and pure excitement crashing in her chest as she started to blurt, "Is this—" The boy shot back, telling the girl this spell was ripped from one of Grandmother Quota's ancient grimoires, an anti-magic weapon with inversion power that can flat out shove the rules of this world aside. And the wild part is it can only be used by the Demon King. When he saw that, his mind sparked. If this horn was so special and vital to the demons, then maybe, just maybe, he could swipe it for his own plans. The girl pressed Risama for clear instructions, and he told her this if she could drive that sword to the demon's horn. The power of inversion would take over, then the demon would finally be freed. The girl begged them to make sure nobody got hurt, and the boy met her eyes, told her to stop stressing, promised she'd pull it off for sure, and then pressed the sword into her hands. The elf poured his heart out and swore that the only soul he could trust, no questions, no limits, was Minora, and the girl shot back with fierce determination, promising she'd never let him down, not even once. A terrifying scream tore through the air at Golgar. Someone ordered him to be killed, and swore they'd seize his mana at any cost. Keeping his back turned, the boy blurts out why his friends won't lift a finger for him, then the man snaps, furious, demanding how he even dared to sling magic so many times. The boy kept insisting that, no matter what, it was all because of that man that he could finally cast spells without a single word. Then he brushed off the man's warnings and swore he was about to try it on him. The man snapped into panic, shouting and protesting, demanding the boy back. With a sly grin plastered on his face, the boy said this was exactly the moment he'd been waiting for, and in his eyes, power blazed back at him like a mirror, absolute and impossible to ignore. The horned boy slumped with his eyes shut tight, and the girl tiptoed up to him, then asked, "Can you hear me? Are you awake again?" She spun around and demanded, "Are you human?" The girl smiled and said her name was Minor, then added that Grandma Quota had treated her like family. The boy spun around and begged to know about his mother, and the girl jolted with shock, then demanded, again and again, if he was really her son. Clutching his head, the boy blurted out that his own indecision got his mother sacrificed to the Demon King, and now his horn burned with rage. He'd completely lost control, and he'd even hurt the people next door. The girl suddenly snapped, "Let's eat together." And the boy blinked like he missed the whole point. She told him, "If you're feeling sick, the kindest thing is sharing a tasty meal with someone." And that's when the boy, still trying to protest, hesitated. The girl leaned in and said she'd heard it from someone she truly admired, and the entire crowd burst with joy, shouting for more and thanking her over and over. A girl cradled a steaming plate in her hands, bubbles popping up and dipping like they were alive, while a bunch of smiling people huddled around her, each gripping their own plate tight, all of them waiting on the treat to hit. The girl spotted something, or maybe someone far off, and immediately blurted out Risama's name at full volume. And the moment he heard her, he snapped his head toward her, letting out a rush of pure relief as he blurted that Minori had literally saved his life, then thanked her from the bottom of his heart while she simply smiled back, soft and sweet. The girl insisted that even way out here from home, dinner time never changes, same as always, and if we're being honest, only Risama could pull off working that long and still find time to talk to everyone. The boy nodded and admitted that Jin took the hit and busted his ass with everyone, while he'd only kept his word to Grillit and the others. Then the girl burst out laughing, made this playful little sound, and declared that if that's the case, she was living for him, only Ris-sama. The boy leaned in and warmly told Minora that she'd grown massively over the last few years. And when she burst into a huge smile, clearly thrilled by the compliment, she practically asked, "Is it really true?" Then excitedly added that Risama had gotten way cooler too. He smirked like he already knew the answer, asking if 80 years of living really hadn't changed a thing. And when the girl replied, she smiled softly but hit him straight. It wasn't about him or his looks at all. The girl flashed that mysterious smile and kept going, talking straight about the time they'd spent together, while the boy just stared, totally thrown off, and even involuntarily blurted out his honest shock. A weird sound ripped through the air from the dragon, and the man barked. "So what do we do next?" The boy and girl immediately snapped with terror, both jolting back at the same time. Then the boy suddenly blurted, "Oh right," like he'd just remembered everything at the worst possible moment. They figured Kwato couldn't be the only village that got hit somewhere nearby. Other demons were still out there, running wild under Golgar's dark control. They all agreed they'd charge in to free everyone else, and they made it crystal clear. They'd do it with Golgar at their side, ready to throw his full weight behind them and help however he could. The girl nodded and said it was totally fine, but the boy shot back that he'd already dumped the whole saving humanity gig onto Jin-kun. 1 year later, right at the same moment, the ruined dragon snapped its jaws wide and let out a roar so furious and so loud it shook the air. Right then, an elf and a dragon crashed into each other in a full-blown battle. Right then, a thunderous roar tore through the air, and the boy's gut told him it could only be the A-rank monster, Goldras, the golden dragon wolf. And yeah, he couldn't shake the fact that monsters this brutal showing up in a boring little village like this is totally wrong, and it screams one thing: somebody's hiding answers. He told Mr. Reese, just like before, that the Demon King's resurrection was about to hit any day, and then a boy and a girl burst out, "Jin," only for the boy to snap back. That's Raiden and Anastasia. Anastasia leaned in and told Jin, "Every monster in this area has gone done for." Jin immediately shot back, asking what they were and whether anyone got hurt. One of them answered, "Nope, everyone's fine." Then Anastasia blurted it all out, shaking with excitement. She'd already burned through every healing potion, and she even had bandages ready and waiting. The girl shrieked for someone to come back, then bolted full speed, and while the boy watched her, he quietly clocked that these water mages were acting wildly out of character, yet he still insisted Rahaf-sama could heal them. Then he whipped his gaze to the girl and asked straight up if it was true Rahaf-sama. The girl snapped her head toward them and said, "Give me a tasty snack and I'll say yes in a heartbeat." And the very next second, the person watching her blurted out in shock at how wildly her attitude had flipped in just 1 year. He told the other guy, "Maybe we should lie, we're out of potions, and we need help." And the second guy shot back, "If it'll really fix this, I could just set it on fire." The kid snapped, started yelling, and demanded answers as to why every member of his squad, each from a different race, was acting so weird. Because they were a team and it should have made sense, then Raiden got the same reply: "Everything's totally fine, absolutely perfect, nothing's out of place." The boy pressed on, insisting those wounds would seal up on their own. Then Raiden snapped, yelling, "Are you even human?" Still, the boy stayed cool and told him it was time to hit their next mission, laying out the plan, and when he glanced off into the distance, his eyes blew wide with shock. They guessed the Kukla fortress was the nearest human outpost to the demon lands, now crawling with even more monsters, and the Lord even reached out to them personally, even while they were already on another mission that screamed, "Something is badly wrong." One of them shouted, panicked more to the core, that if the fortress ever fell, nothing good would come of it. Then the young man looked them in the eyes, called them out by name, and ordered them to move out at once. Raiden asked, "Is it really true your leader is ridiculously impatient?" And stressed, he agreed, then snapped right back somehow. The Dream Travelers still blitzed their way to Group A status in only 2 years. Jin shot back with total confidence. She'd always back him up, stick by him no matter what. And he had this insane talent for tackling jobs that looked totally impossible at first glance. Reports are flying that a brutal fight is raging right now at Kukuli Fortress. People are suddenly facing a monstrous giant creature in the chaos. The hooded wanderer faced them and said, Galavis-sama had been waiting for him forever, offered a sincere apology for the delay, then leaned in and asked if he was the leader of the whole group. The guy with the glasses spun toward him and asked, politely but firmly, if he was hearing right that Jinsan was standing right in front of them. Up ahead, the real ruler Gallius was standing right there, and Gorlun and I were practically vibrating with excitement. Then the bespectacled man snapped his head toward me, saying he'd heard nothing but good things about me. I stammered, through pure awe and respect, basically blurting out that it was an honor beyond words. The man eased down onto the sofa and told them, straight up, they had to rush to the ring forest of Vaster and wipe out every single domestic demon there. No exceptions. Right now. Rage rose in the boy's chest, and Minori, after pinning down the details, blurted in panic, asking if those demons were the filth's doing. The man snapped back that the monsters spilling out of the forest had started striking them with terrifying regularity, and now they were taking brutal losses fast. Then he warned that rumors were flying that the demons in Vaster, which was trapping them from every side, were exploding in number at an insane rate. Then he barreled right on, saying the demonic forces had to be gearing up for something huge, and to him, that could only mean one thing, the Demon King's coming rebirth. Fear slammed into the girl, and she started chanting the words over and over in a shaking voice, horrified that the Demon King's rebirth was actually on the way, while she couldn't shake the dread that they'd never be able to cut down demons whose power kept leveling up, wave after wave, and the man fired back that saving all of humanity was their only priority. The man started spilling the truth, saying that this was exactly why he handed them every last secret inside this fortress, no exceptions. The boy, eyes full of worry, blurted out to the man that those guys had to cut them some slack because they were total rookies, and they'd only just clawed their way up to that rank. One of them argued that maybe they should have picked someone stronger for this mission, and the other snapped right back, agreeing with Raiden's point, then made it crystal clear They weren't insulting anyone because they were genuinely thrilled that they'd been so highly respected. The boy kept firing questions, stunned by the why, and the man, glasses sliding up his nose, leaned in to say, "While demons are seething and waiting for their king, humans are sure of this too. Someone will show up soon and crush every last bit of evil." Then the man kept going and brought up someone who looked almost exactly like the old fairy tale hero, the one who somehow couldn't use magic. The man kept talking, and you could feel the rumors already rippling through the area about Ginny Fleets, a boy he claimed had been ordered to learn under an elf living deep in the forest. The boy grinned and started saying he didn't think anyone would believe this, but the second he opened his mouth, the bespectacled man cut him off, spinning a point about how Rich Klein-sama and Minori-sama were insanely strong, and then asked the boy if he agreed. He blinked, thrown off, and demanded how this guy even knew his teachers and senior students' names. And the man just shrugged because, like his parents and like the boy himself, he'd also been in Risama's debt his whole life, and the boy couldn't help but ask, "Wait, was that really true?" The man said that the moment those words were spoken out loud, it hit him like lightning. He and the other person were both dead serious about keeping the promise his father made years ago. He kept going, saying he finally understood them inside and out because Resama himself had already trusted them, so he'd follow that lead too, and he pushed them to accept his offer. Then he told them, "Become the main protectors of all humanity," and he made it clear the Dreamy Traveler's team has always crushed requests of any difficulty, no matter how wild. He shot up from the couch and declared they'd make sure their client was fully satisfied. Then the guy leaned in and thanked him from the heart. The bespectacled man shoved a folded slip of paper into the young man's hands, told him to take it, and when he finally asked what it was, the man revealed it was something Ritsama left behind right before he vanished, a teleportation circle built for long-distance travel. The man kept going, saying that with this item in hand you could call soldiers straight to you, and the boy blurted out, no hiding his awe, "That's incredible," then admitted they'd never been handed anything like this before, and thanked him with all his heart. He stepped up and told them straight that he wanted to rush them to the capital of Vestera right away, but he couldn't, because they still had one last job to do first. She shouted to her father, her voice shaking with hope, "Did we finally get Grandpa's last wishes to the right people into the right hands?" He blurted, "I can't believe Gallia actually knows Reese the teacher, my buddy won't stop bringing up." And the other guy shot back, "Honestly, I'm just as shocked it's real." The girl spun back and grilled Risa for whether she truly picked him herself, seeing something special in him, so the guy answered, "Yeah, I'm ready to believe it." Because the truth wasn't just this, it was clearly deeper than that. As he kept talking, the man pointed out that the Holy Sword had shown up at the perfect moment, right before they had to face the authorities, and he practically ordered them to move at once to grab that sacred weapon. Right after someone demanded proof that the Holy Swords were real and that they actually existed, every boy in the room shot their mouths open and stared, eyes bulging, all at once in pure shock. With a rude, bone-chilling tone, the bespectacled man snapped out the demon's name, then treachery, and right after that, he commanded Vavakarma. They said a demon once dragged my dad, Gittel Gorlin, into retirement a decade back, and the kid shot back, "Wait, is this the same Lord Orlando they later turned into the God of War?" Then they hit him with the scary part that demon is still planted at the front of the demon army, waiting for their king to be reborn. Tugging his glasses into place, the man declared that the threat hanging over the Kukli fortress would never vanish as long as the demon king still drew breath, but then he snapped, grim and honest, that right now they had zero chance of beating him. The girl snapped her head toward him with a sharp question, and it all but confirmed her suspicions he was trying to stack every advantage they could for the fight against Vava. He didn't waste words, but he answered, "Yes, definitely." The man said the Holy Sword was stashed right where the old hero ended his journey, and that he'd already tipped off the keeper before they came racing toward it. The boy snapped his head toward Jin and blurted out that it was true, despite being totally unable to use magic for some reason. He looked shockingly just like the hero from the story, then he grabbed Jin's attention and demanded, "So what do you think?" Jin said the hero had somehow awakened mana with a rare, wondrous spark while he was totally mana-less, stuck with only a tiny stash of paper tricks, and he added that the teacher had pawned the sword. Still stuck in his thoughts, Jin let out a doubtful, shaky admission he had zero confidence this wooden sword's mana would last long, but he clung to a scared little hope maybe the Holy Sword's arrival would snap the whole situation back around. A crew of young thrill-seekers charged toward a colossal, awe-inspiring landmark that looked like it belonged in legend. One of the boys gushed that the hero's temple was unbelievably beautiful, and then someone shot back that it was nothing but a tourist trap until another kid snapped, complaining that humans really love cranking out tasteless junk, and just then a voice boomed, "You're expected," beckoning them to follow. He barked the order to crack open the door to that pitch-black room, then leaned in and spelled it out, "This is where the Holy Sword rests," and warned in no uncertain terms that regular people weren't allowed anywhere near it, all while urging them to keep a steady pace and not rush off. As they strolled by the sculpture-covered walls, the comments around them lit up with praise how insanely amazing it all looked, and how this hero had saved so many lives. The girl swore she'd never seen luxury like that, but something about it clearly snapped Jean's attention. When they finally yanked the chest open, shock and fury hit them at once because the holy sword that was supposed to be inside was gone, vanished with not a single trace left behind. And rage made them immediately blame their guide, insisting he must have mixed up the directions or the info. Caught up in her own thoughts, the girl figured they were about to test their powers and shot Jin a question. Then the guy, calling her Nastya, snapped, "What's happening?" believing it was nothing more than a magic device as he extended his hand toward it. The boy shot back with full confidence that it was real, then insisted they'd better pour mana into it. But the girl cut him off instantly, saying Jin didn't have a single drop of mana. Jin pushed the idea that this might work the same way as the wooden sword. Then the girl leaned in and asked if he thought mana could already be lurking inside. He slid his palm over the object with careful reverence, then slowly shut his eyes like he was bracing for something life-changing. The boy finally snapped his eyes open, then told the others with a gut punch nothing looked different and nothing tangible had changed at all. Lost in her thoughts, the girl wondered if she had misread her guess. Then the guy pointed at the detailed diagram on the ground and said, "Look closer and you'll spot 4 more that match perfectly." Jin went on alert, remembering that ancient story about the great hero because in the plot, he never traveled alone, not when he marched with 4 comrades, each one carrying a distinct magic or battle gift. The second Jin finished talking, every guy hit the ground at once and, totally unplanned, slapped their palms onto the mysterious magical objects. He reported that nothing had changed again and they still hadn't gotten the result they wanted. Then, out of nowhere, the girl screamed at the top of her lungs and everyone snapped their heads toward the new passage ahead. He snapped back, saying the outcome won't show up, doesn't even exist until 5 people hit the magical mechanism at the exact same time. Out of nowhere, pitch black darkness slammed down, and right after it came frantic screams as the web shot straight for their faces while someone grabbed Raiden and Sam by the nerves, yelling for them to stay calm and not freak out, even as clattering objects rained down all around. Jin snapped his head toward the girl and boy sprawled on the floor and demanded, "Are you two okay? Are you completely fine?" Right before their eyes, the world lit up like a blazing beam dropped from the sky and 5 massive tombs just slammed into view. Jin couldn't shake the eerie feeling they'd wandered into a cemetery because one girl asked who was buried there, and the next one shot back that it had to be the final resting place of heroes. The girl pulled everyone in, pointing out that every tomb carried a different element, and once they got it, she blurted, "Then this has to be the grave of a hero." Ryder was seething with outrage. He demanded to know why this place was so far from human civilization, then snapped that it hurt him so bad, only for the girl to stay calm and point out that the hero wasn't alone, because his loyal friends surrounded him here. With a sharp pause, Jin snapped back to himself, blurted out a rhetorical question about what was happening to the Holy Sword, realized he'd messed up, then marched straight for the grandest, most majestic tomb of them all. He shot back, dead certain he wasn't there, but the guys instantly blew up with offended outrage, yelling that it was impossible and that they'd been tricked again. Still, one of the girls stood her ground, insisting she was there without a shadow of doubt. The girl told him the barrier was set up to shut out outsiders, and she could feel its energy pulsing in the air. Then Ryder, still trying to wrap his head around it, only managed to start a sentence because it sounded like someone had cut themselves off. The boy kept going, saying the man must have slipped through here earlier this morning, right ahead of them, then snapped to Jin and asked what they were supposed to do now. Jin answered with nothing but a dead automatic hero. Suddenly, a voice snapped to the boy's attention, reminding him that even the hero didn't go it alone. His loyal companions had his back, and then it warned him about the truth of the sword. The power it carried was beyond any mana. So in every hard moment, it would come through for him. No question, no doubt. A voice thundered inside his head, telling him to trust it, so without a second thought, he whipped around to his comrades, yanked up his sword high in the air, and vowed that come hell or high water, he'd keep using only the wooden blade that once belonged to his master. He swore to her everything would turn out fine as long as they stayed together, and he promised that again. She nodded and vowed to give it her all with her water magic, and he couldn't resist teasing Lady Rahav, "Don't go drowning in it." Jean told them, "No matter what happens, we'll report every single thing about the hallucinators and we'll make sure they know we're heading for the great forest of Vestera." Then his voice warmed with nostalgia as he added, "I used to be out there myself, a long time ago. Someone just declared it. The time is finally here. They're going back." Suddenly, the tree lurched and started to crash, and right at that same second, a sinister black portal tore open in the air, spitting out a woman's hand with unnaturally long nails, instantly sending the guy into full-on alarm. The demon on the other side flat out said that the barrier around him was deadly strong. Then he smirked, thinking that even if a hero look-alike showed up, every single effort from those fighting him would end in nothing. Out of nowhere, a savage beast lunged at the boys, and while Panic tried to claw in, the main boy stayed cool, snatched the magical object, and blared the incantation for a powerful earth spell. The guy crouched low on the ground and blasted the spell's words. The great spear from the earth speaks. And then, right on cue, razor-sharp spears exploded up from the dirt like lightning. The stench here was brutal. Demon beasts skittered everywhere. The forest plants had all withered, and the ground was literally rotting. The boy was terrified out of his mind, and he blurted it out to grab everyone's attention. Jean cut his sentence short mid-thought, because his eyes snapped against his will straight to the massive tree looming right in front of them. The girl clocked it instantly within that stretch of space. Not a speck of filth dared to show up. Like an invisible shield was holding the grime back, and she swore she'd go check it herself, getting up close to study it for real. The girl asked Rahat if Sama knew anything about this tree, and she said it was no ordinary spot. This was where elves were born, a place even regular people and the spawn of filth couldn't cross. A true safe haven for elven folk, and her reasons for that were... A girl burst into the scene, yanked her cloak hood up, and snapped that she'd rather stay an ordinary person forever than find out this place wasn't the legendary Yggdrasil. She gasped in disbelief, saying she never in a million years thought Yggdrasil, the ancient, sacred tree deity and guardian of every elven people, could ever take root in a land where ordinary folks live. With a sweet smile, she shut her eyes for a second and sighed that she couldn't be shocked anymore then. In a calm whisper, she said, Riis-kun. Jean told her the sacred grounds were where Ri-sama, the all-powerful guardian deity, handed him his knowledge, and he swore he'd never let that teacher down, no matter what. And at that exact second, her thoughts snapped clear as a vivid picture of everything clicked into place, letting her finally grasp the real essence. Right when they heard that eerie sound, the guys snapped their heads towards it at the same time trying to spot what was lurking. Then bam, right in the middle of them, a massive black hole tore open. The demon said that this ancient tree was tied to the hero's destiny, so he'd been watching them from a distance. Then her jaw dropped when they actually showed up in person, and he laughed it off as a wildly fortunate mistake on his part. The instant the newcomer's arrival was announced, it hit Vritra-san was here, and when Jin caught sight of him perched on his shoulder, Jin blurted, I was just thinking about you. Like it was fate. The demon girl shot Vritra with a sharp, sarcastic jab how insanely unlucky he'd been to end up as some pathetic hero's pet. And then, after a beat, she smirked and said he needed to be sealed even tighter, because this time it had to stick. Jin stepped up to ask Vritra-san if she was alright, and she snapped back that things were way worse than that, because when Galileo suddenly remembered him, she'd truly prayed they could handle it. But now, with full conviction, she was certain they couldn't anymore. He straight up said the enemy was unbeatable. Then right on the spot he grinned and told them he'd be thrilled to meet the hero himself, along with his whole crew. Vavakarma, the demonic army's chief commander, snarled that once they finally started awakening their full colossal power, he wouldn't spare a single one of them. He'd wipe them clean off the face of the earth. He couldn't stop thinking about the crushing pressure bearing down on him right now. The demon bellowed that he was calling the instant teleportation circle into being, and then, like he was dropping a battle spell, he shouted, Lafist. The boys were totally stunned. Nothing made sense while they kept asking themselves why that weird situation was happening and why demons kept spilling out of the portal that suddenly tore open. The demon laid out a wild, tangled plan for magical transmission, dragging Levitorium Gallery and a mixed magical circuit into the spotlight. And before the details even settled, one of the girls blurted out whether this fresh dark red magic was the same power that came straight from Vava. And if that meant the transformation was about to tip into demonization, right into berserkers. Vava blasted out a thunderous roar, summoning everyone to strike, then turned to his demons and commanded them to rip the heroes to shreds without mercy. That tiny creature clung to Jin's shoulder, trembling out of terror, then erupted into frantic flailing and loud screams, completely panicked about what they were meant to do and what they could possibly pull off in that moment. Jin quickly leaned in, trying to soothe it, telling it everything was okay, and finally calling it Vritra-san. That guy leaned in and swore that everything unfolding right now was straight up predicted ahead of time and that Gallius and Sama already knew. The boy shot his hand forward, locked in with pure focus, and summoned the doll's fortress magic. Then, boom! A burst of spellfire erupted from his palm. The armored man leaned in and said, I've been Reese's private guard for 30 years, and I've been chief guide for the last 3, and I still owe Reese, Sama, and Gallius everything, because Sama alone is drowning me in an enormous debt, so that's why you've trusted me with your lives. A grim promise slammed into place. They'd crush every enemy, no matter the cost. Then a sharp command ripped through the ranks, even reaching the Kukla fortress, ordering everyone to start it immediately. Radan spun to Raja Sama and Anastasia and told them they needed help. Then the first girl shot back that if she was jumping in, she'd demand a bigger share, while the second girl, standing right behind her, leaned toward Raja Sama and promised, with absolute certainty, to take her under her protection. Raiden blared at the top of his lungs, shouting for Jin to take over right now and crush the leader of their enemies. Jean nodded and promised her his word, begging her to trust him. Then Raiden spun on Vry and barked that she should fry the enemy until they were crisp, and the pet just smirked like it totally understood. Free shot back by calling it out, "That's Raiden," and insisted he had zero business speaking on anything he didn't truly understand. The demon snapped to what was happening and went wide-eyed. Someone was shutting down his teleportation magic by hauling force straight from the Hamham fortress. He paced, thought it through, then finally grunted out loud that, from the looks of it, the strategist on his opponent's side wasn't half bad after all. The demon blared the summoning magic's activation was starting, and the instant it hit, Balmong, the cursed sword of doom, flashed through his mind. Jin's eyes lit up at what he was seeing. He blurted out what sword it was, then went straight for the rumor this blade had supposedly been wielded by the Demon King himself. Vry's nerves snapped. He panicked and screamed that it was all over, while the boy tried to soothe him, telling him to quit spiraling, and Vritra snapped back that he was busy with the hero, and that was all. Jin shot Vritra-san a command to back the squad up, then told her with zero hesitation that she could take the enemy right now by herself if she had to. Terrified out of his mind, the animal stayed quiet for a beat, then blurted, "Okay," giving his consent, and begged that his opponent wouldn't die in this fight before he shot into the sky and vanished fast. The boy, moments from battle, yanked out his wooden sword, locked his eyes on the demon, and after sizing him up, the demon sneered that if this was really the best he could do, then... The demon kept insisting that, with this setup, they'd just wait in peace for the Demon King's full return. Then the boy snapped back, yelling that none of this was finished, and he thrust his sword up, defiantly ready. The moment they started trading sword blows, the demon clearly let down spat that he never thought the hero would be this weak, then slammed a vicious strike into his blade right after. The demon crashed forward, sword slashing in a savage arc, and proclaimed that the Demon King wouldn't have to lift a finger to finish the fight, while the boy, right in that instant, realized one single strike of that filth was already more than he could stomach. Jin finally caught every detail of what was happening, and then he watched that girl grab him, firmly shutting him down and telling him to stay put. The girl kept pushing him back, insisting he not come any closer because even a tiny step toward it would make that filth lunge at him, and if he didn't want to get cursed into a berserker, he had to stay right where he was. Then he shot back. So how in the world can Jean stand right next to the source? The girl shot back that only Yggdrasil's own protection made that kind of resilience possible, but then she made it crystal clear. Yggdrasil held the real power of a hero, so there was only one person who could bring down the Demon King Jin Franz. Jin ignored her and barked for her to stop hunting for an angle, then took off running right as the girl screamed that if he died here, she'd never forgive him, and she'd make sure he heard her blame every single day. He was slumped in a sitting position, gasping for air, while sweat poured off his face like it was unstoppable. The demon shot back with biting sarcasm, basically saying, "You don't get a thing," then sneered that the boy looked like he had nothing left, calling him Mr. Hero, as the boy coughed out his final strength and sank onto the ground, slumped against a rock. His body felt like it was burning from the inside out like actual fire. Then he finally understood Vava controlled every filthy scrap around him. And that's why he couldn't afford to lose a single drop of mana, not even the tiniest bit. Despair crashed over the boy because at the exact same moment, he realized his sword's mana was running out fast, and the end was coming. He knew his wooden sword was already riddled with cracks, but he still refused to quit. He wanted a world where everyone could be happy, so that awful filth meant nothing. The boy finally clocked it, his master and Reese's magic crush. Anything the taint can throw at them, and the demon couldn't believe his eyes. After being soaked in the taint for so long and still standing, the demon called it outrageous, sneered that heroes were nothing but cockroaches, and demanded if he'd ever stop to think about it. The demon kept pressing him, demanding to know why his will was so terrifyingly strong, then zeroed in on the truth. Was it really what he wanted? And did he truly choose to open himself up to all those deadly dangers? The demon leaned in with thick sarcasm, grilled him with sharp questions, jabbed at how the world handed him that power and item just to stop their master from coming back, then sneered that, to this world, he's nothing but a meaningless extra. The boy, totally lost, blurted the keyword actor again and again, desperate to figure out what it meant, while the demon crept closer with slow, bone-chilling menace, then cracked a brutally nasty, malicious grin. The guy, stunned out of his mind, blurted that this just couldn't be true. Then the demon cut him off mid-sentence and crushed his proposal, saying if he backed down right now, the demon's army wouldn't so much as touch the hero, Jean-Francois, or any of his friends. Rage flared in the guy's chest as he snapped, furious at what just happened. The demon blurted that they needed a demon king to stretch their demonic realm until it matched human territory. Then they could finally live there in peace. The boy tried to snap back that he'd never buy into that garbage, but before he could get the words out, the demon shoved in a rude interruption again. The demon kept talking, saying people secretly craved to fight him on a deep, subconscious level. Then he punctuated it with a loud, demonstrative click. He said humanity keeps chasing its dream then. Right from his hoard, a ring of black magic, a sword burst into existence midair, and he stared at them like, "Tell me, do you recognize this weapon?" The demon revealed itself as the holy sword Ascalon, then slammed the truth into him 700 years ago. Their own master was crushed by this blade, and the boy just gaped at the sword, stunned. The demon bragged that everything, every event, every power came from holy energy alone. But then the sword's glow dimmed fast, and it hissed the spell, Gildaris Hammer Crush. The boys erupted into loud screams, begging it to stop, but it was too late, because right then, a brutal explosion ripped through the air. With a smug grin that screamed, "I've won," the demon savored the moment and hissed that every last chance of victory was gone. Then it leaned in, wicked and sly, urging them to stop fighting and just sit down, calm as anything, and talk about what was happening.